Chapter 586, Alarming the King. Forcing out a smile, Jianchen spoke. Bai Lian, you are thinking a little too simplistically. I am nowhere as invincible as you think I am. In truth, there is a heavy weight on my shoulders. With blinking eyes, Bai Lian stared curiously at Jianchen. Brother, just what weight is there on your shoulders? A sigh had escaped from Jianchen's lips. He did not wish to discuss this problem and had thus decided to change the topic. Bai Lian, although your aptitude for cultivation is lackluster, there are plenty of heavenly resources that could change that. Wait until we come across one. I will buy one for you and see that you will find a renewed chance at cultivation. A heavenly resource that can do such a thing would have to be extremely ancient in age. Those are far and few on the continent, and each one of them worth a city's weight in gold almost. Only a very robust and flourishing kingdom would have these heavenly resources in stock. A kingdom like the Jessen or Blue Wind Kingdom would never have the chance for one. In other words, to come across one would be very rare. The usually very quiet Du Gufeng spoke. Wait until we have the chance to explore. I'll do my best to go and find if there are any heavenly resources that fit the description. Jianchen laughed. As of right now, the amount of gold Jianchen had could rival a kingdom. The loss of money for the sake of a heavenly resource would not bother him at all. And even Bai Lian had felt a mellow warmth in her heart and a smile on her face when she saw the care and concern Jianchen had for her. With that said and done with, Jianchen turned his attention to Tai Ta, who was currently seated on top of his magical beast mount in stone-cold silence. Having known Tai Ta's personality and what his expression meant, Jianchen could tell that it would still take some time before Tai Ta would finally adjust to survival on the continent. Tai Ta, all that you've personally seen so far are just par for the course on the Tianyuan continent. A continent where the strong eat the weak and where only the strong have the right to speak. To survive, you must be strong, and without power, there is no point in any discussion. Jianchen spoke. A forlorn expression was on Tai Ta's face when he looked up to Jianchen. Jianchen, this world is far too cruel. I feel as if this is a land where bandits roam. That is an apt analogy. The world has always been like this. Without power, you will only be bullied by another. With power, everyone will fear you and would dare not anger you. What just happened in the courtyards of the Griff clan is only proof of that. Jianchen laughed. Huh, big fellow, you're already such a big person with a mean-looking face yourself. But your heart is pure. What a twist. Ming Dong laughed. Tai Ta's face had reddened when Ming Dong had addressed him, but instead of saying anything back to him, Tai Ta had instead chosen to remain quiet. Jianchen's eyes had looked to Yu Yu by his side. She wore a white robe that accentuated the refined grace she had. It had been no wonder that as a princess, she was said to be beautiful even to bring a kingdom to its knees. There had been a twinge of guilt in his eyes, however. She was his fiancée, but he had no idea how he should treat her now. In his mind, he had no idea how to treat Huang Wan either. She loved him and his parents had betrothed him to Yu Yu, but hadn't personally thought anything about it. Even now, he still didn't even know how to approach the question. Now that he had experienced life on the Tianyuan continent himself, Jianchen had came out from this experience with plenty of enemies. Some of these enemies were saint rulers in isolation, and this had been the instrumental source of stress. A weight so heavy on his shoulders that it may as well be a mountain. For the sake of improving his own strength, Jianchen had to throw away any superfluous thoughts on settling down. All were ants in the eyes of saint rulers. This was something Jianchen knew, and he also knew that unless he had the strength of a saint ruler, he would never be able to hold his footing within the continent. But how could becoming a saint ruler be that easy? Even though he had managed to absorb fragments of the mysteries of the world during his stay in the Holy Lands, Jianchen still had a long way to go before he could even come into contact with that realm. Yu Yu's face had gone slightly red when she noticed Jianchen's attentive stare at her. Gingerly shifting over to him like a bashful deer would tiptoe over to the bush, she whispered to him, Jianchen, was there something you wanted? As if shaken awake, Jianchen gave her a glittering smile. Yu Yu, this is the first time you traveled the continent as well. Are you accustomed to how the life of a wanderer is now? Smiling sweetly, Yu Yu replied, I am rather fond of this lifestyle. Every day is another day where I get to experience and see something new in the world. There's just so much to this world unlike what there is to be seen in the palace. Every day was spent in boredom and the same scenery, and leaving the palace was very troublesome. In the past, I was able to see what the world might have looked through the books in Kargath Academy. It was these books that made me yearn to travel the continent, and now I can finally see the sights for myself. Yu Yu smiled in bliss. The world may be magnificent, but there are just as many dangers as there are sights. Every place of the world has plenty of risks and dangers that could end up as a fight to the death. Every day is a day that a person will die. A peaceful life is not something that anyone could experience. With some slight bitterness to her face, Yu Yu responded to him, Jian Chen, your strength is far more than enough to step across the continent as you please. Just what weight is it on your shoulders that you cannot put down to enjoy life a little bit? Ai. Jian Chen sighed. The weight on my shoulder is something I cannot put down. There are still matters that I must resolve. Just what sort of matters, will you tell us? Yu Yu asked curiously. Jian Chen shook his head, it isn't that I don't wish to tell you, it's just that there is no benefit in you knowing the answer. Let us stop the chat for now and discuss what plans you might have for the Flame Mercenaries, shall we? And so the group began to discuss the matters of the Flame Mercenaries as they traveled on the road back to their inn. Although they had now monopolized every single powerful faction within the Cloud Capital, they were still staying within the inn from before. At the same time they had entered the inn, every single leader that had just joined the Flame Mercenaries had made it home as well. The very first thing they had done was to have someone tear down their signboards and replace it with the name of the Flame Mercenaries. Jian Chen's actions had flown at incredible speeds around the Cloud Capital. Soon enough, practically everyone had heard and learned about how the equilibrium of power had been completely and thoroughly shattered. In the past, there had been many factions vying against each other, but now, there was only a single faction left. In the 3 whole days that the Flame Mercenaries had been in the city, they had managed to overcome everyone's expectations, and so the entire city had been set abuzz with this as their topic of conversation. When the Lord of the Cloud Capital himself had heard what had transpired, his entire person went as stiff as a board. He simply couldn't believe what he had heard. The 10 or something factions that had once been separate were now united. With their powers united, they were now stronger than not only the city lord, but most of the factions in the Blue Wind Kingdom. A fact that was completely shocking to think about. A very serious problem had popped up in front of the Lord now. His power as the Lord of the city was practically for show now, and if the Flame Mercenaries were to try and do something in the city, there would be no way for him to do anything but to stand and watch by the sidelines. Just what sort of god is the captain of the Flame Mercenaries? If he is able to unite so many factions together under his banner, just what is he made of? The Lord had spoken with narrowed eyes. The robustness of the Flame Mercenaries had caused the man no small amount of discomfort. The Flame Mercenaries has already evolved to a point where even I cannot do a thing about them. All that's left for me to do is to report this to the king himself. The Lord muttered before hastily writing a letter to send off to the Imperial Palace with the utmost haste. Nearly half a day later at the Imperial Palace of the Blue Wind Kingdom, the king had been sitting in his study room when he received the letter. Reading it, his face grew more and more solemn, and the further he read, the more his eyebrows furrowed together. A long while later, the king had finally put down the letter with a questioning mutter, Flame Mercenaries? Just where in the world did they come from? I've never heard of such a name, and yet they have already subjugated several factions that had an Earth Saint Master in their ranks. That is practically unbelievable. The fact that the Flame Mercenaries had managed to accomplish so much by uniting several dozen factions together into one faction had been an extremely important issue that made the king very worried. Then, as if the king had thought of something, his eyes began to sparkle. Perhaps there is a Heaven Saint Master within the Flame Mercenaries. Only a Heaven Saint Master would be able to accomplish a feat like subjugating several factions at once. Having reached this conclusion, the king's face grew inexplicably solemn. Men! Call for Master Ku Yun into my study at once. Soon enough, an elder with gray robes came striding into the room. This elder was in his 60s and had bright eyes that sparkled brilliantly. "Your Majesty, what matter have you called me here today?" The elder smiled, but he did not bow to him. Holding out the letter to the man, the king spoke, "Master Ku Yun, please take a look yourself." Waving his hand, the man floated the letter from the king's hand and into his own hand before starting to read it. Soon enough, the elder's eyes began to show signs of surprise. What a mercenary team this Flame Mercenaries is. In 3 days, they managed to unite over a dozen factions? But with a strength like that, why have I never heard of the Flame Mercenaries before? I am quite vexed by this situation. These Flame Mercenaries are most likely a foreign power that immediately sought out to subjugate an entire first-class city in one go. Their scheme is very apparent to see. If we let them alone in our kingdom to grow, then they will become the bane of our existence sooner or later. The king spoke seriously. Chapter 587, The Advent of a Powerful Enemy. "Your Majesty, are you saying to get rid of this group?" the elder inquired. A hum escaped from the king's mouth. "I wouldn't say get rid of. The fact that another strong individual has appeared within the Blue Wind Kingdom is a boon to us as a whole. But I fear if he is an outsider and has come into our kingdom to expand his influence before taking those men and leaving the kingdom. Should that happen, the damages to our kingdom would be huge. We have only just finished a war with the Jessen Kingdom. Our weakened kingdom definitely cannot sustain another crippling. Then what does your Majesty believe needs to be done?" "Master Ku Yun, I'll be troubling you this time. I hope that you will be able to investigate the Flame Mercenaries yourself and see what their goals are. If they wish to stay within the kingdom as they try to grow, then I will of course welcome them. But if they wish to steal away people or anything else that could affect our kingdom negatively, then we must strike them down at once without mercy." The king spoke. "Understood, I know what needs to be done." The elder nodded before turning around to leave. "One moment, Master Ku Yun." The king called out to the elder. "Master Ku Yun, your king is worried that there will be a Heaven Saint Master within the mercenary group. So before you leave for the Cloud Capital, take some people with you." "Thank you for your concern, your Majesty." A brief smile and bow was given to the king before Ku Yun continued on his way out from the study with his head high. As soon as the king saw Ku Yun leave the room, a wave of concern washed over him. "Why do I feel so much unease? Is it because of this Flame Mercenaries? Will it be this newly made mercenary group that will be a scourge onto my Blue Wind Kingdom?" He had remained seated where he was with a grim expression. After the battle of the Jessen Kingdom, the kingdom has lost 4 of 8 Heaven Saint Masters, and even the remaining 4 are all heavily injured. I hope that this feeling of unease is just a feeling. Within the Cloud Capital, discussion had run rampant throughout the next 2 days. Whether it was the main streets, hidden alleyways, or the restaurants and inns, everyone could be heard talking about the Flame Mercenaries. The Flame Mercenaries had appeared in the Cloud Capital as if out of thin air. Then, with unbelievable speed, they had combined the powers of the first-rate factions into an even bigger entity. News like this would definitely cause a major buzz within the city. Consequently, this had caused the second- and third-rate factions to feel slightly nervous. For the entire day, they had been extremely nervous to the point of having some clans electing to temporarily leaving the city and hide away until the crisis was gone. They were afraid that the hands of the Flame Mercenaries would stretch towards even them. Many if not all of the factions did not want to lose the power they had worked for to become a lackey for another. Of course, not every of these factions had been like that. Some of them had even took the initiative to look for the Flame Mercenaries in hopes of joining it. When the dozen major clans that had initially joined were given the command from Jian Chen, they began to accept all of the newcomers into the mercenary group without declining a single one. Right now, the Flame Mercenaries needed new blood to join the Flame Mercenaries. When it came to management, Jian Chen wasn't concerned. The dozen clans had enough power to lay down the law on their own and could easily manage their own mercenaries too. From the other side, the lord of the city had not been as happy to see more and more people join the Flame Mercenaries. The more people that joined, in fact, the more nervous he became. Nothing could be done on his part to ebb this chaotic maelstrom that was happening within his city aside from standing in silence on the sidelines and hope that someone from the kingdom would come in to interfere. It is fortunate that the feral mercenaries are all out on a mission, otherwise they might have been annexed into this mess too. The Lord muttered. In the blink of an eye, the maelstrom had only gotten bigger. For days had passed now, and the flame mercenaries had continued to swallow up even more factions into their folds. News of what had transpired in the city had even made its way across the entire Blue Wind Kingdom. No matter if it was a big or small city, each and every one of them had heard about it. Whether people believed it or not, the news that they received had sparked a paradigm shift in the Blue Wind Kingdom. The rise of a new powerful faction had come. A long ways away from the cloud capital was the first-class Tianlong city. Within the biggest mansion in the city stood a middle-aged man. Cloaked in white robes, this man stared out at the pond in front of him with both hands behind his back. This was the Lord of Tianlong City. Almost absent-mindedly, the Lord began to mutter to himself, "Ah, how unexpected. A truly unexpected event it is." The originally weak and piddling mercenary group back in Wake City has suddenly transformed to be strong enough to subjugate the entire cloud capital in several days. A change like that is utterly inconceivable. Inside another room in the same mansion sat Cat Ada and Katafii. Seated at a table, the two of them were discussing with one another over a bottle of wine. Having rained his cup, Cat Ada spoke to the other, "Katafii, you ought to know what happened back in the cloud capital too. Do you think that the flame mercenaries there are the very same ones from Wake City?" "I do." Katafii spoke. As the stoic one of the two, he cherished his words as if they were gold and did not dispense them easily. "How are you so sure?" Cat Ada pressed on. "Jian Chen's strength is an unknown to us, but to have a sixth cycle Earth Saint Master at his beck and call? It is him." Katafii spoke. There had been suspicion and confusion to be in his mind, but his face betrayed none of those emotions. Draining the rest of his cup in one single gulp, Cat Ada sighed. It really is hard to believe that Jian Chen has accomplished so much in just 2 years. 2 years ago he was said to have joined the gathering of the mercenaries. Did he receive some sort of boon while he was there? It's a tremendous pity that Mercenary City is nearly worlds apart from our kingdom. Only the most important news would make it way here. Jian Chen was at this moment sitting on top of his bed within the inn of the cloud capital. As he was trying to cultivate, Xiaobai continued to roll around on the covers of the bed for amusement. It had been fortunate that the cover was a very simple and inexpensive one, for it had already been torn to shreds by the claws of the tiger cub. Jian Chen had not left the inn for several days and spent his time cultivating in his room to wait for everyone else to fully recover and finish what was left before embarking on their trip out from the cloud capital. "Captain of the Flame Mercenaries, make your way to see us at once." Suddenly, a voice like thunder had boomed through the skies. The speaker's voice had been so strong that it seemed to shake the world itself. The streets shook and the buildings quivered, even the clouds had been blown away to reveal the sun behind it. Everyone had heard the voice to what very well might belong to a god. For a moment, the entire cloud capital was quiet before suddenly erupting into a cacophony of sound. Everyone had turned their heads to the skies as if trying to find the origins of the voice. "I see them, look. Over there. 2 men in the skies. Those are Heaven's Saint Masters." Suddenly, an excited middle-aged man pointed erratically at a point in the sky with a loud cry. The heads of everyone in the city turned to look where the man was pointed at, and indeed there were what appeared to be 2 tiny ant-like dots up in the sky. While small in figure, the might that exuded from them made them look more like gods descending upon the mortal world. Those are 2 Heaven's Saint Masters. They have to be here to fight the Flame Mercenaries. It's all over for them now. What a calamity for the Flame Mercenaries. With 2 Heaven Saint Masters here, they're ruined for sure. Everyone had been furiously discussing this topic with some hidden glee. But those who had joined the Flame Mercenaries already had gone pale in the face. The lord of the city came scrambling out from his mansion to stare out into the skies at the 2 Heaven Saint Masters. 2 Heaven Saint Masters? His Majesty has sent 2 over them over? Great. This is fantastic. The flame mercenaries are definitely ruined now. From every part of the Cloud Capital, several dozen factions that had aligned with the flame mercenaries came filing out. When they saw the 2 Heaven Saint Masters floating high in the sky, their faces had gone pale. Those who had been forced into joining had a happy look on their faces, but those who had willingly joined had felt a fearful look spread on their faces. A single Heaven Saint Master was already enough to worry them. But 2 Heaven Saint Masters was a tremendous amount of pressure on them. From within his own room, Jian Shen slowly opened his eyes to look up. At the same time, the doors to his room opened to reveal Ming Dong and the others. Jian Shen, 2 Heaven Saint Masters are here. How rambunctious they are to strut here and there on the skies. Do they think no one knows who they are? Ha, if they're willing to try it, I'll beat them black and blue until they run away. Ming Dong laughed. In his eyes, a Heaven Saint Master wasn't some sort of unreachable entity he could not chase up to. Captain of the Flame Mercenaries, come on out at once. Don't think that hiding away in the city like a tortoise will help you. This time, another voice had exploded out from the skies with a reverberating echo. The loud voice had angered Ming Dong. Who the fuck is that to be so aggressive sounding? A cold smile appeared on Jian Chen's own face. Stay here, I'll go out to greet them myself. As soon as he spoke, a single hole had suddenly appeared on the top of the roof, revealing the bright azure skies beyond it. Not even a second later, Jian Chen had already disappeared from his bed into the skies. Chapter 588, a battle that entrances the entire city. Above the skies of the Cloud Capital, the 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the Blue Wind Kingdom towered over the ground like 2 gods watching over the mortal realm. And on the streets below, countless of bystanders craned their necks to look up. For these 2 Heaven Saint Masters, everyone could only look at them with expressions of admiration and uncontained worship. The realms of Heaven Saint Masters was a realm that mercenaries could only look at in yearning. Talks of reaching this realm was merely just talk. Out of the millions of people in the Blue Wind Kingdom, not even 10 of them were Heaven Saint Masters. Suddenly, an azure streak of light zipped into the skies. In the blink of an eye, the light had already risen 500 meters to near the 2 Heaven Saint Masters. The speed of this light had been so fast that the bystanders on the streets hadn't even seen it clearly or where it had even come from. Everyone, look! Another Heaven Saint Master has appeared. Do you think he's the captain of the Flame Mercenaries? He has to be. But I didn't think that there'd be another Heaven Saint Master here. What speed that captain has! I didn't even see where it was coming from. He has to be a very powerful one. Humph. This time there's 2 Heaven Saint Masters from our kingdom to greet him. No matter how strong this captain is, there's no way he'll be a match for 2 Heaven Saint Masters. Right now, the eyes of everyone in the city had been glued to the sight in the skies. No matter what it was they were doing, everyone could only stare at this splendid sight for them and discuss to one another furiously. No matter where one went in the city, the streets were jam-packed with people that stood transfixed. Inside his mansion still, the Lord of the Cloud Capital concentrated his eyes onto the 3rd Heaven Saint Master. So, the Flame Mercenaries had a Heaven Saint Master as a captain. He muttered. The leaders of every single faction within the city had stood entranced at the sight as well. Staring at the 3 ant-like objects in the sky, each and every single one of them had found a sudden desire to see what type of battle the 3 Heaven Saint Masters would perform for them. Up in the skies above, Jian Chen and the 2 Heaven Saint Masters stood 20 meters apart from one another. I am the captain of the Flame Mercenaries. Was there something you wished to know? Jian Chen sneered with narrowed eyes. Rooted to where they were in the skies, the 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the Blue Wind Kingdom could only stare with rigid wide eyes at the dreadfully familiar face of Jian Chen. Already had their faces gone slightly awry. Between the 2 sides was already a pre-existing grudge. The captain of the Flame Mercenaries was you? One of the Heaven Saint Masters spoke. The expression he had before had disappeared without a trace. Jian Chen laughed coldly. Correct. It is this one. Since you were so adamant on calling me out, was there something you wished to tell me? The eyes on Jian Chen's face suddenly gained a spark of killing intent in them. Sensing the killing intent from Jian Chen's eyes, the two Heaven Saint Master felt their hearts tense up in vigilance. They had first seen each other in the battle with the Jessen Kingdom, and it was there that they saw this youngster kill the Heaven Saint Masters from the Qiangan and the Blue Wind Kingdom himself. In the end, only 4 out of the 8 Heaven Saint Masters from the Blue Wind Kingdom had escaped with their lives. Despite the tender age of this youth, these 2 Heaven Saint Masters knew better than to belittle him for his age. There was absolutely no way possible that they could win against this man. This is an unfavorable situation, we're leaving. The 2 Heaven Saint Masters had immediately resolved to leave the area when they sensed the killing intent from Jian Chen grew heavier and heavier. It went without a doubt that should they stay here, the skies above the Blue Wind Kingdom would become a battlefield sooner or later. And under no circumstances did either of the 2 wish to partake in a battle with a man who could kill Heaven Saint Master after Heaven Saint Master consecutively. Leaving? What makes you think that you can do that so easily? Jian Chen laughed. He had no plans on allowing these 2 to leave so easily. Clenching both of his palms, 2 swords made of fire suddenly materialized out of thin air and shot towards the 2 escapees. Detecting the abnormality behind them, the 2 Heaven Saint Masters thought to themselves, it seems that a battle is unavoidable. The 2 of them had reacted quickly to the attack, and so with a thought, a wave of earth and water suddenly gathered in their hands. Within a mere second, a dragon made of earth and water had formed between the 2 men. Seeing that the 2 men were seemingly competing with him in a battle of elements, Jian Chen let loose a sneer on his face. Fire is the strongest of the 6 elements in strength. Even the light and dark elements would be unable to compare. If you wish to fight me with the elements, you will surely be the ones to eat the loss. The Heaven Saint Master controlling the Earth Dragon had not said a word and instead pushed out his hands. With that action, the Earth Dragon flew out with a roar to charge towards Jian Chen. Fire is indeed the strongest element of the 6, but my water will put out your fire nonetheless. The other Heaven Saint Master barked out. The aquatic dragon let out a roar of its own before flying towards the blades of fire to devour it. Bang! The earthen dragon made contact with one of the flame swords with an explosive bang. In an instant, the dragon had been reduced to dust before fading away in the skies, while the sword had continued onwards, albeit being smaller than before. Before the impact, the sword had been 5 meters long, and now, it had been reduced to a single meter. Another explosion rang out through the skies shortly afterwards as the second flame sword collided with the water dragon. In a brilliant display, the water dragon exploded apart to turn into a spherical ball of water to try and drown out the flame sword within it. Water and fire were in nature contrasting elements. So when the 2 elements intertwined with one another, a sizzling sound could be heard while vapor rose up from the sphere to cover the visibility of the 3 combatants with the smoke. From either side of the battlefield, neither person could see the other. The cloud capital had been a cacophony of sounds that erupted this way and throughout the city. But now, the city had transformed into a ghost city without a single bit of life to be seen. Not a single person had said a word as they watched the spectacle above them. Even the rooftops of the buildings had people standing on top of it, but not a single of them had dared let out a breath of air as they watched the battle. Ming Dong, De Gafeng and the others stood on top of the roof of the inn to look up at the battle. Not a single one of them had looked worried for Jian Chen. However, they did not need to worry about any danger that might befall Jian Chen, as they were all confident in his strength. 2 Heaven Saint Masters weren't nearly enough to harm him, and even if that number were to be multiplied, Jian Chen would not be harmed still. Only Bai Lian had been nervous about Jian Chen since she did not know his full strength. She knew that her older cousin was a Heaven Saint Master as well, but the fact that he was going up against 2 other Heaven Saint Masters worried her greatly about Jian Chen's life. Just like Bai Lian, Tai Ta had worried for Jian Chen too. Bang! A muffled explosion rippled through the airs once more as the saint weapon of the controller of the Earth Dragon smashed against the flame sword. This time, the sword had disappeared into wisps of fire before disappearing from the world itself. At the same time, the battle between fire and water had ended as well. The steam from the struggle had grown fainter and fainter, but no sizzling sounds could be heard anymore. Finally, the three Heaven Saint Masters could see that the water dragon had disappeared without even a drop of water to be seen, while the flame sword had decreased by half its size. What a flame! The Heaven Saint Master had cried out. But even before he could finish his speech, the flame sword had shot straight at him with a velocity that was even faster than before. Not daring to taking any careless risks anymore, the Heaven Saint Master took his saint weapon out and smashed apart the flame sword with narrowed eyes. If Sire wishes to be as aggressive as you are, then do not blame us too for being impolite. Ku Yun, let us use our battle skills together. Nodding grimly, Ku Yun knew that the battle today was undoubtedly a battle where they had to fight to the best of their abilities in order to survive. And now that the two of them were on the same page, neither of the two hesitated to begin to use their battle skills. As Heaven Saint Masters, using an Earth-tier battle skill could be done with ease and did not need any additional time to charge up the power for it. Earth-tier battle skill Hammer of the Earth God. Earth-tier battle skill Dimensional Sword Chi. As the two of them finished casting their battle skills, a tremendous sledgehammer 10 meters long made completely from the earth element formed above Ku Yun. With a single movement of his hands, the hammer slammed downwards onto Jian Chen. By his side, the other man had exuded a tremendous fog of sword chi that shot forth the envelope Jian Chen within it. From Jian Chen's eyes did two bright lights of azure and violet form. As they gleamed and twinkled, the two lights seemed as if they were two dancing will-o'-the-wisps made from the powers of a different world. Suddenly, all sorts of stones, bricks, tiles, and even steel had begun to levitate up into the skies. From each object that flew up, a faint glow of azure and violet could be seen radiating from it. At the same time, the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits had formed into a single sword. Wielding it in his right hand, Jian Chen had seemingly transformed into a whole different person. With a sword in his hand, the aura around him had turned as sharp as his weapon. Following a flash of azure and violet, a series of mirror images followed Jian Chen's figure as he streaked through the skies. Wielding the origin energy, Jian Chen waved his sword and immediately sliced through the giant hammer as if it were made of tofu rather than earth. And so in a single stroke, the hammer had been split in two. With the hammer destroyed, Ku Yun's battle skill had been broken up as well, meaning that the earth element that had been materialized for it had disappeared back into the world. And no. That's not possible. Ku Yun cried out in fright and dismay. How had his earth-tier battle skill be so easily defeated like this? But Jian Chen had continued to wield his origin energy sword with blinding speed towards the man without pause. With an explosive power that was no less inferior to his saint force in the past, the azure and violet origin energy had stabbed itself deeply into Ku Yun's chest and then out from it. Chapter 589. Unrestrained expansion. A short-winded cough came from Ku Yun's mouth as the blood drained from his face. The other man paled considerably when he saw Jian Chen pierce straight through Ku Yun's chest. With a loud shout, a large amount of his sword chi began to fly out to strike down the countless pieces of rubble flying at them. Then, with his saint weapon hoisted overhead, the man flew to attack Jian Chen to save Ku Yun. Jian Chen turned to look at the man with a cold smile appearing on his lips. Was it you that told me to come on out? Don't even think about leaving here today alive. Jian Chen pulled out the origin energy sword from Ku Yun's chest and shot toward the second man like a bolt of lightning. Clink. Upon contact with the azure and violet beam of light, the saint weapon of the other Heaven Saint Master let out a cracking sound. A piece of it broke off. Against the azure and violet sword spirits, the saint weapon of a Heaven Saint Master may as well be as strong as a roof tile. Pfft. With his saint weapon damaged, the elder was seriously injured and spat out a mouthful of blood as well. Jian Chen's hand did not slow down after the first blow. He swiftly moved his wrist to deliver his second slash with a speed like lightning. Under the powerful muscles of his arm, the sword traveled so fast that only the reflection of the blade was seen. Before the other man could even understand what was happening, the origin energy had stabbed into his forehead. It pierced out the back of his head, extinguishing his soul and killing him completely. Ba La. Ku Yun howled in grief and sorrow when he saw his friend pierced through the head. He knew that the Blue Wind Kingdom had lost yet another Heaven Saint Master. With the origin energy stabbing straight into Ba La's head, his spirit was utterly vanquished. The light in his eyes vacated and his body started to drop back down to the ground. With hands as quick as his eyes, Jian Chen palmed Ba La's space ring before turning back to speak to the anguished Ku Yun. I was planning to kill you, but I think I'll spare your life. Go back to your king and tell him that it'd be in his best interest to not interfere with the matters of the Flame Mercenaries. If he refuses to listen, then do not blame me for what happens next. Even as he spoke, the origin energy formed by the azure and violet sword spirits faded from sight. The muscles in Ku Yun's face twitched irregularly as he stared down this youth in front of him with a mixture of fear and shock. Even his voice quavered when he delivered his next line. The war between the Jessen Kingdom and the Blue Wind Kingdom is finished, and we've doled out hefty compensation already. There is neither grievances nor hatred between you and Ba La. What reason did you kill him for? A loose tongue causes plenty of troubles. You should remember in the future that less is more. Leave now, and don't forget to tell your esteemed king what I've told you. Laughing, Jian Chen turned to descend from the sky back to the inn. Still in mute shock, Ku Yun remained floating in the air, desolately looking at the dead corpse of Ba La down in the streets. His corpse had not moved at all other than from the still-spreading pool of blood. A crowd of people had formed around the corpse, and not a single one of them could believe what they saw. Dropping down from the sky, Ku Yun took Ba La's corpse with him and immediately left the cloud capital. When they arrived in the cloud capital, the two of them had made an aggressive entrance. In the end, only one of those men left the city alive. With the battle between Heaven Saint Masters finally finished, the entire city was left as still as a ghost town. Mercenaries and merchants alike stared at the sky in mute shock and disbelief, even though not a single Heaven Saint Master remained. A dozen figures were already running to the spot where Ba La had landed with as much speed as they could muster. Just barely stopping around the bloodstained spot, each one of them revealed a sluggish expression on their faces. Included in this group was the Lord of the Cloud Capital and several of the other leaders of the strongest factions. What was unknown, however, was what was running through their minds at that moment. Jian Chen had already returned to the inn and onto the bed he had been sitting on before. The only difference this time was that a hole could be seen in the ceiling above him. Ming Dong and the others were already back in the room, so when Jian Chen descended, Bai Lian came flying past the doors to greet Jian Chen excitedly. Wow! Brother, you're amazing. Even the two Heaven Saint Masters of the kingdom were beaten by you. Bai Lian spoke. She looked up to Jian Chen with great big eyes of adoration. A single person being able to defeat two Heaven Saint Masters working in tandem without a single scratch was essentially an undefeatable entity to her. She was exuberant in her worship for Jian Chen since he had been able to prevail against two Heaven Saint Masters by himself without being hurt at all. A feat like this was practically on the same level of an unbeatable being. Something like this was more than enough to make her realize in this moment that her older cousin was a far stronger person than she had initially thought. Wrong, he killed one and injured one. If Jian Chen didn't let that second one live, then neither of the two would have left this place alive. Ming Dong corrected her. Bai Lian was even more elated to hear what Ming Dong said. She rated Jian Chen higher on the pedestal now. Even Yu by Jian Chen's side revealed a slight tint of infatuation in her eyes. However, she looked up at the hole in the ceiling above Jian Chen and softly said, Jian Chen, perhaps we should change rooms since you put a hole in the ceiling. Jian Chen looked up at the hole he had created with an embarrassed smile. Yes, perhaps I should change rooms. Looking back at the ruined ceiling, Jian Chen gave an embarrassed smile. Perhaps we should. Not a single person within this room had bothered to pay attention to what was happening outside of the room. Thus, they were unaware of the pandemonium that was happening right now. The hottest topic in the city was about the fact that the captain of the Flame Mercenaries had successfully beat back 2 Heaven Saint Masters sent from the kingdom all by himself, and the fact that he had managed to kill one of them while injuring the other was something that everyone clearly witnessed. With that said, practically everyone within the city was in an uproar. Having witnessed this sight, news of what transpired in the sky above the city spread throughout the entire kingdom with great speed. Within practically half a day, every nook and cranny of the kingdom would know about this groundbreaking news. The leaders that stood on top of the Blue Wind Kingdom would take this news seriously and would later send out their strongest to verify the truth of the rumors. With everything said and done, the Flame Mercenaries would cement their position within the Blue Wind Kingdom. The fact that the Flame Mercenaries had been able to subjugate an entire first-class city was enough to have the eyes of many on them, but the fact that this new situation had happened made everyone terrified at their strength. Within the palace of the Blue Wind Kingdom, Ku Yun held the dead body of his companion Ba La within the halls where the king sat. Slowly, Ku Yun narrated what had happened to them both in the cloud capital while also describing Jian Chen to the king. As soon as the entire story was recounted to him, the king sighed. In that sigh, he seemed as if to have aged years in a single moment. For a while, the king was quiet before he finally spoke once more. As we are powerless to stop them, it is pointless to even try anymore. Our Blue Wind Kingdom had already grown weak because of the war. With this happening, our power is doomed to drop even further. Several days later in the cloud capital, a long procession of people passed through the gates of the city. Every single banner that was flown around this group displayed the exact same emblem of a circular sphere of fire. This group of people all belonged to the Flame Mercenaries. The Flame Mercenaries of today were definitely on a whole different scale than before. In the past, it had been a single person, but now, it had expanded to over 5,000 people, becoming the strongest group of mercenaries within the Blue Wind Kingdom. Their cumulative strength was more than enough to contend with any other faction in the kingdom. Leading the group at the very front was Jian Chen, Ming Dong, Tai Ta, De Gufeng, Yu Yu, and Bai Lian. Each one of the 6 were seated on top of their own magical beast mount, but this time, they were no longer riding a Class 3 magical beast. They were now seated on top of a Class 4 magical beast. All of their mounts had been graciously donated by the heads of the faction they had just recruited. By now, every single person had accepted their newfound status in the group and were now earnestly working for the Flame Mercenaries as a whole. Having a powerhouse like Jian Chen as their support wasn't an easy thing to find, and by joining the Flame Mercenaries, they could earn the chance to win the Earth-tier battle skill they had always dreamed of. They could even get a Heaven-tier battle skill that even Heaven Saint Masters would drool over. These 3 factors combined were a tremendous temptation to them. Even if the heavens were to drop a meat pie in front of them, it would not be as alluring. If anyone were to tell them that a Heaven Saint Master was capable of absorbing life from them, they would not care. All in all, they were not regretting their new way of life. Most felt delighted to greet this change and did not feel displeased at all. "Captain, where will we go next from here?" Zhang Tian asked from the side. "Tianlong City isn't too far away, let's go there," Jian Chen replied. In a short few days, the Flame Mercenaries had experienced a period of expansion with no restraint. Just like that, a first-class city had found itself annexed into the Flame Mercenaries, exponentially increasing their power. After the entire matter with the Cloud Capital ended, the Flame Mercenaries possessed about 300,000 members and almost 100 Earth Saint Masters, leaving the Blue Wind Kingdom practically desolate of its stronger population. The Blue Wind Kingdom had no solution for the growth of the Flame Mercenaries. They had no one to stop them. They had no way to even try. All the king could do was sit within the halls of his palace with a miserable expression as he watched the Flame Mercenaries grow stronger and stronger while his kingdom grew weaker and weaker. By the time the strongest factions of the Blue Wind Kingdom had heard what Ku Yun had told the king, they were all absolutely convinced that the captain of the Flame Mercenaries could not be angered at any costs. For that reason, none of the factions came forward to stop the expansion of the Flame Mercenaries, and some of them had even prepared themselves to be annexed into the group as well. Chapter 590, A friend has come in the blink of an eye. 2 months passed. During these 2 months, the Flame Mercenaries had exponentially expanded and earned a place as one of the strongest mercenary groups in the Blue Wind Kingdom. A group that stood on top of the other leading factions and even the royal palace itself. Up to this point, only the strongest families and factions had been able to prevent themselves from being subjugated by Jianchen. A large mansion was situated at the very center of a first-class city called Wanzhou City. This mansion had originally belonged to the strongest power within that city, but had now been reclaimed to become the living area of the Flame Mercenaries for the time being. Even the name board at the very front had been swapped for the emblem of the Flame Mercenaries. At this current moment within the magnificent halls of the mansion, Jianchen and the strongest 100 members were all gathered around a table to discuss several important matters. For the moment, the rest of the mercenaries were all stationed outside the city in a clearing since they could not all enter the city at the same time. Captain, only 3 out of the 6 strongest families in the Blue Wind Kingdom were willing to join our Flame Mercenaries. The other 3 would rather die than submit. Zhang Tian dutifully reported. He was one of the first to join the Flame Mercenaries and was also one of the 3 Earth Saint Masters from the Carnage Mercenaries, and had been given the right to speak for the entire group. From his seat at the very front of the table, Jianchen revealed a small grin on his face as he took in the news from Zhang Tian. 3 of them were willing to submit, I see. Not bad, I wasn't expecting as much at first. Which 3 have agreed? Not long after he finished speaking, 2 middle-aged men and an elder come walking over with respectful salutes and greetings. This one is Shi Wanjun, representative for the Daong clan. We of the Daong clan would be happy to join the Flame Mercenaries and hope that we may follow the honorable captain into the brilliant light. This one is In Situ, representative of the Domineering Heavens sect. We would be happy to join the Flame Mercenaries. This one is Dick Perosi, delegate of the Shuelan clan. We are willing to join your Flame Mercenaries. These 3 men were all Earth Saint Masters at about the 4th or 5th cycle. The parties they represented were among the strongest powers in the Blue Wind Kingdom and once had a Heaven Saint Master presiding over them. However, those Heaven Saint Masters had been killed in the war with the Jessen Kingdom. Staring at the 3 humble and respectful men, Jianchen nodded his head in satisfaction. I welcome you into the family that is the Flame Mercenaries. From henceforth, we are all family. As long as you work with the Flame Mercenaries in mind, then I, Jianchen, pledge to never treat any one of you wrong. I declare that the Daong clan, the Domineering Heavens sect, and the Shuelan clan, will change their names to that of the Halls of Daong, Domineering Heaven, and Shuelan. And you 3 will still lead your respective hall. Jianchen had no desire to expunge anyone of their power upon entry into the Flame Mercenaries. The only thing that would change would be their goals. Their relative power would remain untouched, but any sect or clan would be changed to a hall. 1,000 thanks for Captain's charity. The 3 men clapped their hands together in salute. All 3 of them had been worried that their authority would be stripped away from them the moment they joined the Flame Mercenaries. Sitting on his seat while deep thought, Jianchen said, Zhang Tian, take some people to Lust City and eliminate the Harito clan. A report for the captain. Rumors have it that the Harito clan vacated Lust City a long time ago. According to our same sources, they've fled the Blue Wind Kingdom already. A black-robed elder spoke. What? They've already left the kingdom? Jianchen's eyes narrowed for a moment before he waved his hand with a small smile. They act quite fast. If I had known that they would flee earlier, I would have moved to deal with them sooner. Captain, why don't we dispatch a team to chase after them? Zhang Tian asked. Giving it a second to think about, Jianchen replied, no need. I will handle the Harito clan myself since they're no longer a threat to worry about. Unless their leader is able to become a Heaven Saint Master, they won't be able to do anything in the meanwhile. Even if he becomes a Heaven Saint Master in the next 20 years, our Flame Mercenaries will have grown strong enough to deal with them. Even if I'm not here, a single Heaven Saint Master won't be able to measure up to the strength of the entire Flame Mercenaries. They've decided to run away from the kingdom for now, so we don't even need to bother with them. Then Captain, what shall we do about the 3 factions that chose death over submission? An elder asked from the side. Jianshen leaned back in his chair while his fingers kneaded. He realized that leading the flame mercenaries was becoming more and more of a headache. It was no longer as easy as before where he could act as he pleased. Back then he was the only member and didn't require such heavy consideration. Everyone, why don't you inform me of your ideas? Jianshen suggested. Captain, since the flame mercenaries have become so strong and those 3 factions refuse to submit, we shouldn't let things lie there. We should eliminate them all. Let them serve as an example to the world of our strength. Captain, we should avoid that at all costs. The remaining 3 factions still have 2 Heaven Saint Masters within their reach and a considerable amount of Earth Saint Masters. If those 3 join hands, then they will become an enemy that will deal a considerable amount of harm to us. Should we fight them, then we would anger even the kingdom itself. If they mobilize the entire army, then our flame mercenaries would suffer even more. Captain, those 3 factions are not to be belittled. We have no conflict with them, and even if they would rather die than submit, it is not worth going to war with them only to suffer a disastrous result. The ends do not make up for the means. Everyone came to different conclusions about how to handle the situation. On one hand, some wanted to eliminate the group. On the other hand, some wanted to forgive and let them be. From where she stood by the side, Bai Lian hesitated to speak for a brief second. Finally she gave her input. Brother, there is no conflict between us and the 3 factions. We don't have any real need to subjugate them, and we should forget about them for now since they're willing to die rather than to submit. With 2 Heaven Saint Masters, they'd cause a lot of damage if they joined together since our flame mercenaries have no other Heaven Saint Master besides you, brother. Bai Lian and I share the same opinion. Yu agreed with her. Everyone grew quiet when the 2 of them spoke. They all knew that these 2 women were both very close to the captain, and thus they were not willing to say anything else. Jianshen wasted no time to agree with the 2 of them. If that is so, we'll forget about this matter for now. Well, today's meeting shall end here then. You may all leave and make the preparations for whatever necessities you need. In 3 days, we leave the Blue Wind Kingdom. Yes, Captain. Everyone agreed before leaving the halls. After the meeting was adjourned, Jianshen returned to his own room. He lay down on the bed and closed his eyes. His fingers gently tapped against his temples. Now that the flame mercenaries had exploded in scale, it took even longer to consider and think everything through, causing Jianshen some fatigue. Suddenly, the doors opened to reveal Yu wearing a pink long skirt as she walked into the room. When she saw Jianshen rubbing his temples, she revealed a concerned look on her face. Jianshen. She softly continued, managing the flame mercenaries is a tiresome task, isn't it? Yes. It really is quite tiresome. Now that the flame mercenaries have grown, there is far too much to consider and far too many factors to think about. It is only now that I realize how tremendous a task it is to manage such an enormous group. Aside from having an equally tremendous amount of power, one must not neglect being able to control and manage everything. Jianshen replied while massaging his headache. Choosing to sit on a nearby chair, Yu said, "You could delegate these small affairs to someone else you know. There aren't many that I could trust. Aside from the group we travel with, there are no other capable people. Ming Dong is the vice captain, but I know his nature. He isn't cut out for something like this. De Gufeng does not have the power, and Tai Ta is further away from such a position. The only ones left would be you and Bai Lian." Jianshen sighed. Then his eyes flew open as he looked to Yu. Yu, I know that you've been an intelligent person since childhood and spent years learning in Kargath Academy while growing up in the palace. If I have you and Bai Lian govern the flame mercenaries, do you believe that you would be able to do the group well? Yu was pleasantly surprised to hear the words that had come out of Jianshen's mouth. What? Jianshen, do you really think Bai Lian and I should be governing the flame mercenaries? Sitting up, Jianshen faced her with an earnest expression. I do. If you have the ability to govern, then I would be willing to allow you to do so in my place. That would be great, Jian Chen. You may rest assured. Bai Lian and I won't let you down. Yu Yu excitedly replied. Just then, Ming Dong walked into the room. When he saw the happy Yu Yu by his side, Ming Dong stared suspiciously at Jian Chen. Brother, you've a friend here to see you. Who? Jian Chen asked. You'll know when you come. Ming Dong smiled mischievously. Suspicious of his actions, Jian Chen followed Ming Dong out of the room and into the open courtyards of the mansion with Yu Yu following him from behind. Soon enough, Jian Chen arrived at the gates to the building, but when he saw just who this familiar person Ming Dong had referred to, the expression on his face solidified into one of astonishment. The friend in question was Huang Wan. Chapter 591, Battle of Two Women. Stunned, Jian Chen stared at Huang Wan. She was standing by the gates and then his eyes swung to Yu Yu standing right next to him. He felt the complaints inside his head grow so huge that they would take off his head. Not once did he ever think that Huang Wan would take the initiative to find him, especially when his fiancée was right next to him. One woman was someone he had some feelings for and once had a very close relationship with. The other woman was his fiancée that was known throughout the Jessen kingdom. Jian Chen didn't even know just how to treat this matter since this was the first time these two women had come into contact. Ming Dong clearly understood just what sort of trouble Jian Chen was in, but he had no intentions of helping him at all. Instead, he chuckled, Brother, I have some things to take care of, so I'll be leaving first. Ming Dong hadn't really meant what he said. He turned around just a few steps away to observe Jian Chen, Yu Yu, and Huang Wan with a smile on his face as if he was taking pleasure in the crisis befalling Jian Chen. Forcing a smile, Jian Chen asked Huang Wan, What brings you here? Today, Huang Wan was wearing a white-colored robe that accentuated her picture-perfect figure that only the devil could offer. Her figure possessed an allure that could seize the hearts of anyone with just a single motion. Her clothes were on point with how they had been tied. Not a single part of her robes was messed up. Compared to the clothing she had worn as the golden daughter of her clan, she looked like a heroic woman ready for travel. The icy-cold demeanor on Huang Wan's face had instantly softened the moment her eyes fell upon Jian Chen. Smiling, she said, Are you not going to welcome me in? Her voice leaked a feeling of close friendship. The forced smile was still on his face when Jian Chen addressed Huang Wan, Of course I will welcome you in. Please, come in and we can have a chat. Giving a sweet smile to Jian Chen, she tossed down the reins in her hand and followed him in. The guards at the gates were members of the Flame Mercenaries, so they immediately rushed in to take the mount away. Stopping in front of Jian Chen, she eyed his handsome face with a tender-hearted smile. She was just about to say something when, all of a sudden, she realized that there was another beautiful woman standing right next to Jian Chen. Eyeing her with some confusion, she asked, Jian Chen, who's this? Hello, I am Yu Yu. Yu Yu answered first. There was a smile on her face, but in her heart, there was a sour feeling. The feelings Huang Wan had for Jian Chen were obvious to see. Hence, she was able to infer that the connection between the two was close. Yu Yu? Could you be the Grand Princess to the Jessen Kingdom? Huang Wan asked her in shock. She nodded in response, Correct, that is I. Might I ask who you are? The light in Huang Wan's eyes changed when she regarded Yu Yu now. There was a darker tint of light that seemed to contain some jealousy just barely hidden in them. I am Huang Wan, a member of the Huang family. Ah, Miss Huang Wan, which kingdom are you from? I have heard of the Huang family before, but which clan it is something I know not. Yu Yu smiled softly. I'm afraid to disappoint the princess, but my Huang family is affiliated with no kingdom. We live in the mountains and rarely encounter the surrounding kingdoms or any other family that might share our surname. Huang Wan replied. Sensing the hidden steel to their tones, Jian Chen felt his headache grow bigger and bigger. Why don't we walk inside first and continue our talks there? He pressed. Jian Chen, Yu Yu, and Huang Lan were all seated around a circular table in a splendid and magnificently decorated room. Huang Wan was excited to see Jian Chen, and talked to him non-stop about the flame mercenaries with great curiosity. Whenever she asked another question, Jian Chen answered truthfully without leaving any mystery behind. Huang Wan's eyes brightened at this moment as if she had remembered something. Looking to Jian Chen, she said, "Jian Chen, I've something to tell you. I've become the student to the patriarch of the Huanggu clan. They're even willing to teach me their scriptures of the aqua sunflower, a saint-tier cultivation method." What? A saint-tier cultivation method? Jian Chen was astounded. Although cultivation methods weren't as wanted as a battle skill, a saint-tier one was priceless despite that. Extremely rare and sparse, only the most isolated of hermits would have these cultivation methods. It is a cultivation method for those with the water affinity, something I coincidentally possess. Because of this, I learned it and cultivated the cultivation method for a small moment. In just 2 months, I was able to bring up my power so fast that I went from a first cycle Earth Saint Master to a second cycle Earth Saint Master. It won't be long until I become a third cycle Earth Saint Master, and with this rate of progress, becoming a Heaven Saint Master won't even take too many years. Huang Wan's face was filled with unrestrained excitement. Yu Yu felt shock grip her heart right by Jian Chen's side. She had not thought that this wildly dressed Huang Wan would be an Earth Saint Master despite the close similarity in age to her own. Not only that, she too did not expect to hear that she was learning a saint-tier cultivation method, something that was only mentioned in legends. Not too long later, Yu Yu managed to restrain her emotions and maintain her calm demeanor. From what she heard, this Huang Wan was definitely someone high in status and was possibly one of those golden daughters belonging to a tremendous family. Not only was her talent at cultivation higher than her own, Huang Wan was already an Earth Saint Master at her age while Yu Yu wasn't. Lastly, Huang Wan had managed to find a teacher that imparted a saint-tier cultivation method onto her. This meant that she was practically superior in every single aspect, and even with Yu Yu's status of a princess, she paled in comparison to Huang Wan. Jian Chen noted the change in Yu Yu's demeanor with some concern. He immediately broke off the conversation, and called for someone to prepare Huang Wan and room. He then dismissed everyone. Even after leaving the room, Yu Yu felt extremely depressed. Walking by herself to her own room, she sat on top of the bed and stared despondently at the wall across from her. The doors to her room slowly opened to reveal Jian Chen gently making his way into the room. Jian Chen felt his heart clench when he saw how Yu Yu was faring. Closing the doors behind him, Jian Chen walked over to Yu Yu and sat down beside her. Studying her face with great concern, Jian Chen was about to say something, but then he realized he had no idea just what words he could possibly use to comfort her. He sighed. Jian Chen was not someone who understood how to speak with flowery speech, and in a situation like this, he was utterly powerless. There was a gleam to her eyes when Yu Yu turned to look at Jian Chen with a miserable expression, but it was because of the reflection of the light on the layer of water that was welling up in her eyes. At last, 2 teardrops formed just enough to flow down her beautiful face before they splashed on the ground. Jian Chen panicked at the sight of her teardrops, but before he could speak, Yu Yu beat him to the punch. "Jian Chen, tell me. Were your words before about you having no time for women a lie? You were unwilling to wed me before, was it because there was already another woman in your heart, a woman who is far superior than I am?" She was heartbroken, and her voice was threatening to break into a sob. In all honesty, her heart felt nothing but love for Jian Chen, and that's why she found it heartbreaking to be in such a situation. When Huang Wan showed up today, the deep feelings she felt for Jian Chen were completely obvious, visible even to the naked eye. Combined with the fact that she was superior in every way to Yu Yu, the princess felt this other woman's presence as a tremendous threat that could steal away the man she loved. Pulling at Yu Yu's hands, Jian Chen clutched them with great intimacy as he softly said, "Yu Yu, it isn't what you think it is. The reason why I wasn't in a hurry to wed you was because I wasn't ready to settle down. I have not yet resolved the problems that weigh on my shoulders, and if I don't resolve them before I start a family, then it will only bring everyone harm. I won't hear this. I don't want to hear these lies. Just how many times have you said these words? Yu Yu began to cry. At a loss for words, Jian Chen looked at Yu Yu. From the very start of their relationship, Yu Yu had given him the feeling of someone that was always calm, but this was the very first time he had ever seen Yu Yu cry her heart out. This was something he felt a great deal of pain over. He sighed once more. He had to be honest with Yu Yu, else he would only hurt her more. Yu Yu, although it may seem as if I am invincible on the surface as a Heaven Saint Master and an imperial protector of one of the 8 great powers on the continent, my life is not as relaxed as you think it might be. I have many, many enemies that pose a threat to me still. Jian Chen suddenly spoke before segueing into the hidden story of his life to her. Yu Yu paused temporarily in her tears to fixate her eyes on him. In my years roaming the Tianyuan continent, I offended many families, and although some of them were killed off, there are still plenty of hidden factions that I have no way of fighting against. Among those families are the Shi family and the Jetta clan. These 2 factions are hermit clans on the continent with a vast amount of strength due to the fact that they have saint rulers ruling over them. Only death would absolve the grudges between those factions and me. If I am alive, they will not rest, and if they are not dead, I will never be safe. It is likely that those 2 clans have been searching for me ever since, and even if there is a long distance between the 2 of us, it is only a matter of time before they arrive here. The very moment they find out my identity, being the imperial protector of the Qinhuang kingdom won't be nearly enough to help me. Thus, I must improve my strength as much as I can. If I do not, then when the saint rulers come for me, I will die a pauper's death along with the family I have. Aside from those 2, there is still the sect of Dragon and Tiger from the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. They are a powerful sect to contend with, and their patriarch is a saint ruler that heavily desires a treasure of mine. Me being an imperial protector of the Qinhuang kingdom has beaten them back temporarily, but they will not stop at that. It remains to be seen just what sort of tricks the saint ruler might come up with to harm me. Staring solemnly at Yu Yu, he continued, Yu Yu, do you understand the overwhelming pressure that weighs upon my shoulders now? The enemies I've made are people of the saint ruler realm. As I am now, I stand no chance against them. Even escape is an impossibility. With how the odds are stacked, I have no idea just how much time I have left to live. Chapter 592, Ancestor of the Huanggu clan. In order to cure the wound in Yu Yu's heart, Jian Chen had no other choice but to explain everything he had hidden from the world. Even his parents had never heard this information. Jian Chen knew that if he hiding his secrets like this would only serve to confirm the worries in Yu Yu's heart, dealing another blow to it. That was something Jian Chen wanted to avoid. Yu Yu had completely stopped her tears as she listened to Jian Chen speak. The 2 glistening eyes on her beautiful face stared at Jian Chen in silence. She finally understood, this very moment, the tremendous amount of pressure Jian Chen had always talked about and just what great dangers were waiting ahead of him. A saint ruler was an unfathomable entity in the eyes of Yu Yu. They were people that belonged to the legends of old. Only a few people on the continent were able to come face to face with them. Jian Chen, on the other hand, had managed to not only make enemies with a single saint ruler, but possibly 2 or even 3 of them. The fear Yu Yu felt in her heart was outweighed by the deep worries she had for Jian Chen. He clenched his hands tightly over Yu Yu's. It was a first for him to really realize just how smooth and tender her jade-like palms felt to the touch. The sensation was very soft indeed, but Jian Chen didn't pay too much attention to the details. Instead he stared back at Yu Yu with a stern expression. Yu Yu, I have not told even my parents of this, so I hope you will safeguard these secrets of mine. Do not let my mother know at all costs. A saint ruler is far too strong for the Changyang clan to weather as it stands now. I don't want the clan to worry for me. Dazed, Yu Yu continued to stare at Jian Chen. The grief and sorrow she had felt before had completely disappeared, but now, worry and concern had replaced it. I am sorry, Jian Chen. I didn't know about just how large this scale was. Yu Yu lamented. Giving a small smile, Jianchen shook his head. You, it is fine as long as you understand. The hatred between those two families and me is irreconcilable. Without that matter resolved, I really do not wish to waste time trying to start a family of my own. Yu was placated for now. She was now feeling better than when she had first entered the room, allowing Jianchen to return to his own room in peace. However, as soon as Jianchen walked into his drawing room, his entire figure grew rigid and a sharp light glinted in his eyes as if it was reflecting the light of a sword being drawn. Seated in the room was a blue-robed elder with his back facing Jianchen. Seated by the table, he drank a single cup of tea with only his own company to converse with. This man had long, black hair that went down his back without a messy spot to be seen. At a glance, he appeared to be just a regular person with no outstanding traits. However, this seemingly unimportant person made Jianchen stare at him seriously as if prepared to take action at any moment against an enemy. This person was practically undetectable to even Jianchen, and if it were not for his own eyes seeing the man, Jianchen would have overlooked the man entirely. The only ones capable of managing such a feat were hermits of the Saint Ruler level. Having a Saint Ruler suddenly appear in his very own room was something that made Jianchen nervous. "Who are you?" Jianchen questioned as he shifted his right hand behind his back to clench the jade piece in his hand. Since he could not fight against a Saint Ruler, then his only option was to ask for the assistance of the Huang Patriarch. Little brother, do not be nervous. This old man came for an impromptu visit. If I disturbed you, then please forgive me. An elderly voice came from the mouth of the blue-robed man. Yet, he remained seated at the table with his back still facing Jianchen. Sensing no hostile aura around the man, Jianchen eased up slightly while staring at the back of the man. "Senior, who might you be? If you wish to know even that, then I'll tell you this. That girl Huang Wan has already told you about her having a teacher." "That is me, I am her teacher," the man replied. Jianchen was astonished, and the look in his eyes reflected that astonishment. "Could you be the patriarch of the Huanggu clan?" "Correct, that is I." With his identity confirmed, Jianchen let out a mental sigh of relief. Although a Saint Ruler was undoubtedly a tremendous source of pressure to him, at least this one was no enemy to him. "Little brother, come sit and let us talk," the man suggested. Easing back into the calm and easygoing nature of his, Jianchen strode to the seat on the other side of the man and sat down. Straight away, Jianchen could see the man's face. It was a very ordinary-looking face that was filled with wrinkles due to age. The only difference was that a single blue seal sat in the middle of his forehead, but it was hard to make out the picture in full clarity because of the wrinkles. The elder leveled a meaningful glance at Jianchen. "Little brother, should I be calling you the imperial protector of the Qinhuang kingdom or the fourth master of the Changyang clan? Or perhaps, Jianchen?" "Senior, please just call me Jianchen." He smiled. The old man nodded his head just slightly. "Then I shall do so. Jianchen, I am not one that enjoys beating around the bush, so I shall get to the point." He paused for a brief moment to take in a breath of air. "Jianchen, I came here specifically because of Huang Wan, so the matter we will be discussing will relate to Huang Wan herself." Jianchen could feel his heart sink. Could this be about the betrothment between your Huanggu clan and the Huang family? Shaking his head, the elder replied, "That matter has already been settled and dealt with. I won't even bother to try and harangue the matter any longer. Instead, I came here today to talk about her future." "Senior, what might you mean by that?" Jianchen asked, mystified at what the elderly figure was getting at. Humming, the elder thought for a moment, trying to find the best way to describe his thoughts. "Huang Wan has a very particular body that comes once 1,000 years on the continent. If she were to train with a water affinity cultivation method, her growth would be exponential. For that reason, I bequeathed the Saint-Tier cultivation method to her so that she could learn twice the amount for half the effort. Becoming a Saint Ruler wouldn't be difficult for her at all, but there is a single taboo she must not commit. Until she becomes a 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master, she must remain pure at all costs. Otherwise, the effects she will receive will be irrevocably disastrous for her." The elder spoke with an increasingly grim voice. Jian Shen had been listening on with the utmost seriousness, but when he heard what the patriarch said, he could not help but blush a little. Giving an embarrassed smile, he said, "Senior, you may rest assured. The relationship between Huang Wan and I is nowhere near such a situation." "That is good then." The man nodded his head in satisfaction. "Jian Shen, you should know that for the sake of Huang Wang's future, you must uphold her purity. This junior understands." Jian Shen scratched his nose in embarrassment. He couldn't help but ask himself, was he really a person that wanted nothing but lust? With that said and done, the patriarch stood up from his stool. "This old man has said all that he wanted to say, until we meet again then." The next moment, the patriarch disappeared from the room without a trace. Looking left and then right, Jian Shen could see that the windows and doors to the room were still tightly shut. There was virtually no way to escape from this sealed space, and no crack or crevice to be seen. With those factors to be considered, Jian Shen had to truly wonder how the patriarch had left. A saint ruler is truly powerful. The powers they possess are far beyond what I can imagine. Jian Shen muttered with a twinge of jealousy. So Huang Wan's talent stems from her body itself. No wonder she was able to become an Earth Saint Master at such a young age. Several kilometers away, the patriarch of the Huanggu clan materialized out of thin air as if he had been a mirage. No longer teleporting here and there, the elder chose to instead fly the rest of the way at incredible speed. Now that I've told him that, he will most likely not see Huang Wan as a wife for now, leaving her body completely intact. Though, even if he wishes to do something unbecoming to her, the restriction I've placed on her will not let him get away. The elder smiled darkly as if he was plotting something. In the blink of an eye, a year passed. In that year, the flame mercenaries had grown spectacularly and without ever stopping. The stronger factions of the several surrounding kingdoms had been completely annexed, including the factions from the Qiangan Kingdom, the Qianlong Kingdom, the Andreas Kingdom, the Pingyang Kingdom, and even some of the other kingdoms that had once nursed a grudge with the Jessen Kingdom. This made the flame mercenaries into a hegemon to be feared. Their members had exploded to over 100,000 with over 500 Earth Saint Masters. Even several Heaven Saint Masters had been coerced into it, making the comparison to the past a very shocking one. The flame mercenaries' explosive growth made them a household name that everyone knew about. Practically every mercenary or mercenary group would talk about the flame mercenaries with either eyes of envy or admiration. The flame mercenaries had exploded in power so fast that the scale today could practically be considered a miracle made in real life. Within a desolate piece of land, a group of people riding on mounts could be seen resting. Buildings could be seen all around them, and not too far away, several hundred fumes of fire spiraled into the air. Mercenaries sat around each of the fires in groups of 3s or 4s as they talked to one another over a piece of magical beast meat. Hoisted overhead was an emblem of a ball of fire. This was the emblem of the flame mercenaries. Seated at the very center of all the banners and tents was Jian Shen and the others who were currently discussing matters. Jian Shen, as of today, the flame mercenaries have reached a very definite scale of over 100,000 members. The time is ripe for us to create a city of our own. De Gufeng spoke. Chapter 593. A vein of tungsten alloy. Jian Shen had to think about De Gufeng's proposal for a brief moment. He knew that there were plenty of mercenary groups that managed to construct their own cities after gaining enough power. It was only when a mercenary group founded their own city that they had the right to say they were someone important on the Tianyuan continent. Mercenary groups that owned a city were extremely strong, and the flame mercenaries paled in comparison to the majority of mercenary groups in power. Although they had well over 100,000 members, the amount of people that were strong enough to assume responsibility over any single jurisdiction were far too few. Aside from Jian Shen, there were only 3 other Heaven Saint Masters. If they were to try to construct a city like this, it would be insanely difficult to maintain their power. They would end up as the losers if their city was besieged. Not only was it common for kingdoms to fight with another for power, mercenaries would oftentimes move into cities and attempt to seize power almost as often. With those factors in mind, Jianchen finally made up his mind and said, "Our flame mercenaries might be strong in our area, but our strength is still limited to just this small area. We are not quite yet strong enough to attempt to build a city, so we should hold off for now." "I agree. Our group, the Flame Mercenaries, is quite strong, but there is still a huge threat of internal danger. Therefore, we should refocus our efforts in trying to resolve the matters with all of the members. We must ensure that the relationship between each and every mercenary is as tight as a twine of rope. Otherwise, the flame mercenaries that we built up with will crumble at the base and collapse sooner or later." Yu added her insight. "Is that so? Then why don't we spend the next period of time listening to you when dealing with internal matters? Yu, Bai Lian, I'll leave this to you to handle. If there is anything you need from me, go ahead and ask." Jianchen replied. In this short moment of time, the flame mercenaries had been left up to Yu and Bai Lian to administrate. After being tested for an entire year, Jianchen had seen more than enough to be convinced that the two of them were talented in this aspect. Bai Lian's cultivation talent was not unique. She hadn't even managed to form her saint weapon yet, but her keen wit and intelligence was unbelievably sharp. It was better honed than Yu's intelligence in several aspects. It was almost as if she was born to be a superior administrator. "A report for the captain, we've received a letter to give to you." At that moment, a single voice called out from outside. "Hand it over." "Yes." The flaps of the tent blew open as the white-robed Ha-Ni came walking in. In his hand was a snow-white lightning bird. Taking the lightning bird from Ha-Ni into his own hands, he untied the letter around its leg. He then unfurled it to read. "Important. Return to Changyang Manor." Only a meager few words had been scrawled on the letter, causing Jianchen's expression to become very grim. Taking note of the sudden change in expression, everyone nervously tensed up. It was Yu that finally asked out of concern, "Jianchen, what happened?" Jianchen studied the letter once more to verify that it wasn't a fake message. Then, slowly tearing it into several pieces, he explained, "A letter came from back home telling me to return to the Changyang clan. We'll have the mercenaries stay here for now and wait for my return. If something urgent happens, notify me by the twin jade stones." Bidding farewell to Yu and the others, Jianchen went and found the other 3 Heaven Saint Masters to give them their instructions. Afterward, he flew with great speed through the air back to Changyang Manor. By the time he arrived, it was already nightfall. As he began to descend to the ground, the Chang Wuji immediately made himself known. He was able to pinpoint him the moment he touched solid ground. "Fourth Master, you've returned rather quickly, I see." Chang Wuji smiled. Jianchen let out a secret sigh of relief when he saw the relaxed face of Chang Wuji. From the very start of his rush back home, he had been worried that something had happened to the family. "Chang Wuji, what has happened for you to ask me to come home at once?" Jianchen asked. "I do not know the details, but men from the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom came with a very important message to tell you. They said it was a matter that couldn't be delayed. Your father sent a message for you to return right away." The elder explained the best he could. "Heavenly Eagle Kingdom? Did that kingdom not cease to exist?" Jianchen tilted his head in confusion. Unable to stop himself from chuckling, Chang Wuji smiled at Jianchen. "Perhaps I should have phrased it differently. The 7 heads of the territories that once belonged to the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom came here with an important message for you. Fourth Master, they are currently in the discussion hall. We should head on over." Shortly after that, Jianchen and Chang Wuji entered the manor and headed straight for the main halls. On the way, plenty of guards saluted him while the maids and servants bowed down with the most respect they could muster. It did not take long for Jianchen to enter the halls themselves. He noticed that plenty of people were already gathered here. Most noticeable was his father and mother, the other important elders of the Changyang clan, and a sturdy-looking middle-aged man who was currently in deep discussion with someone else. The arrival of Jian Shen was apparent to everyone. They lined up shoulder to shoulder and bowed to cordially greet Jian Shen. At this moment, everyone in the halls was filled with respect for him. The middle-aged man that had been discussing stuff with everyone else came forward to bow and greet Jian Shen personally. Captain of the Blood Moon Mercenaries, Tynes, pays his respects to the Imperial Protector. After the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom dissolved, it had been split into 7 partitions. The Blood Moon Mercenaries had subsequently become the overseers of one of those 7 partitions. Regaling the man, Jian Shen said, "Tynes, what important matter was it that you needed to inform me of? What can you tell me about it?" Looking around the hall, Tynes hesitated to speak. "Imperial Protector, this is a matter of utmost secrecy, so," understanding his intentions, Jian Shen replied, "If that is so, then we shall speak in my own residence." "Yes, Imperial Protector." Looking to his father, Changyang Ba, and his mother, Bai Yuntian, Jian Shen said, "Father, Mother, your son has matters to take care of. I will be leaving first. Xiang'er, Captain Tynes has trekked countless of kilometers to run to the Changyang clan. If it is a serious issue, you needn't worry about your parents, go and take care of what you need to do." Changyang Ba laughed. "Xiang'er, time is of the essence, go and do what you must." Bai Yuntian softly replied. A son that was as outstanding yet filial as Jian Shen was a son that she felt an exorbitant amount of pride in. Exchanging several more words of greeting to the other members in the hall, Jian Shen led Tynes back to his own building. "Tynes, what important matter do you have to tell me? Has the sect of Dragon and Tiger decided to mobilize against you?" Jian Shen inquired with a solemn expression. Tynes shook his head and looked carefully around the place. Then, speaking into Jian Shen's ear, he whispered, "Imperial Protector, we have discovered a tremendous deposit of tungsten alloy." "What? A tremendous deposit of tungsten alloy?" A spark glinted in Jian Shen's eyes as he murmured to himself. Tungsten alloys were extremely sparse on the continent and worth several times their weight in purple coins. A single kilogram was already worth 10 kilograms worth of purple coins. "Yes, Imperial Protector, our Blood Moon mercenaries came across this vein in one of the mountains by pure accident. After further investigations, we found an even larger vein. Based off a shallow investigation, we concluded that the purity of the ore is at least 85%. Tynes' voice quavered. Jian Shen felt a gasp escape his lips, and his heart began to beat even faster. A purity rate of 85% meant that out of 100 ores, 85 of them could be smelted into tungsten alloy. How many people know about this place? Jian Shen suddenly asked. "I've killed off all those that knew this knowledge outside my group, meaning there's only 50 or so people that do. They are all confidences of mine, and I am sure that they will safeguard the secret of this vein as strictly as I." Tynes replied seriously. A sigh of relief escaped Jian Shen's mind. A vein of tungsten alloy was practically an immeasurable source of wealth, since a single kilogram of tungsten alloy was worth 10 times its weight in purple coins. If news of this got out, then there would definitely be bloodshed over it. Imperial Protector. This vein of tungsten alloy is extremely precious and tempting for any faction to give up. If news of this were to leak out, then we would have no power to protect it. Imperial Protector, how do you propose we handle this situation? Should we have the Qinhuang Kingdom oversee it? After a careful moment of consideration, Jian Shen replied, "If news of the vein has not been leaked out, then let it remain a secret in the meanwhile. Tynes, hurry back and see over it yourself for now. Have the other 7 factions join with you to protect it in secret and extract it in secret. Remember, the less people that know about this, the better. News of this cannot be divulged at any costs. I'll figure out what to do after." "Yes, Imperial Protector." Tynes bowed and cupped his hands in salute. "There's no time to waste, hurry back over." Chapter 594, Hurrying off to the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. Tynes left for the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom straight away. With how precious the tungsten alloy was, he couldn't possibly dare try and be negligent over a plethora of wealth like that. There were no Heaven Saint Masters safeguarding it, so Jianchen felt some discomfort at this matter. He was afraid that the news would be leaked. Pacing around the middle of his room with his hands clasped behind his back, Jianchen's mind raced with ideas about how to deal with the tungsten alloy vein. Unknowingly, the small tiger cub had leaped onto his shoulder and stared at him. Its originally bright eyes had already grown dim as if it was growing listless. It appears I must bring the flame mercenaries over to the territory of the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom, Jianchen concluded. After thinking to himself for another hour, Jianchen left his room to call his mother for a meal before leaving the Changyang clan. All sorts of dishes were placed in a beautiful arrangement on top of the table as Jianchen, Changyang Ba, Yuntian, and the other 3 wives of his father sat together and talked. The fact that Jianchen was the captain of the Flame Mercenaries had already been revealed to his aunts, but it was still a very puzzling thing to think about how he was also the imperial protector of both the Qinhuang and Jessen kingdom. After a brief interrogation by his aunts, Jianchen explained everything without losing his temper. There were no secrets in regards to the Flame Mercenaries to his mother after all. Xianger, you've done the right thing. If Kendall saved you, then you must fulfill the promise you gave for it to be a fair trade. Changyang Ba approved. Xianger, in your times of travel outside, have you come across any news of your sister? Bai Yuntian suddenly blurted out. Jianchen could only shake his head with regret. He sighed. Auntie, your child has searched without end, but nothing of importance has come up. Yu Fengyan's face became more sorrowful at his words. Wretched girl, who knows what faraway place she has run off to? Why hasn't she even sent a letter back home? Even now, I have not one letter from her and not even a clue on where my Mingyue has gone. What if she... Halfway through her words, Yu Fengyan could no longer stop herself from descending into a fit of sobs. Her own daughter had left the clan one day without warning or trace, causing her to feel extremely anxious and scared for the well-being of her daughter. The table grew quiet after that. Each person seated there had a grim look on their face. Every person at this table, besides Jianchen, were either aunts or a parent to Changyang Mingyue, and had seen her grow since birth. So her disappearance had been extremely worrisome to them all. Jianchen had disappeared once, but he had been of a different situation and had came back. Second aunt, please be at peace. Second sister has always been a lucky person, she won't come across any trouble. Look at me, I left the Jessen kingdom for several years by myself without anything harmful coming my way. Jianchen consoled her, but to no avail. Yu Fengyan and the others simply did not think that Changyang Mingyue had the same capabilities as Jianchen. A single woman traveling the continent by herself was a feat that was several times more dangerous than for a male. All sorts of unsavory mercenaries and bandits roamed the continent. It would not be uncommon for them to act upon their lust for women. Our daughter has grown up with a rebellious nature. We are to blame for that. If we did not try to force her into an arranged marriage, she would not have left home. Changyang Ba sighed bitterly with regret. Father, second aunt, please rest assured. I will definitely have my men scour the continent to find second sister. Jianchen resolutely pledged. When he was young, Changyang Mingyue had been very caring to him, and he had left the Changyang manor with a very favorable impression of her. The disappearance of Changyang Mingyue had left him feeling very melancholic. Forget it. There's no point in talking about this matter for now. We've gone over it more than enough with nothing to show for our efforts. Changyang Ba sighed before turning to Jianchen. Xianger, your father still has something that I hope you'll agree to. You and your third aunt, Ling Long, have harbored some ill will with one another, that I know. Your third aunt has a small level of tolerance for matters like these due to experiences she has had in the past. Her making life difficult for you was a result of these experiences, but even now, she and your third brother have felt remorse for their actions. They have not been eating with the rest of the family because of their guilt. So, your father wishes that you will understand and forgive your third aunt. Changyang Ba spoke. There was a slight pleading tone to his words. A sound that was exceedingly rare, especially to a child as the head of a family. Jian Shen was more than willing to agree to his father's request. He did not feel completely disgusted by the actions of his third aunt. They were by rights family, and Jian Shen was disinclined to ruin a perfectly warm and receiving household with an opinion he didn't hold. The fact that he was willing to let bygones be bygones pleased Jian Shen's father to no end. Afterward, Jian Shen took out a small portion of the 100-grass wine given to him by the Ape King. Pouring the cups evenly, he distributed them all to the people around the table. As soon as each person took a sip, they could feel their inner strength explode with newfound power. Just 3 months ago, Changyangba had managed to become a second cycle Earth Saint Master. He now stepped into the third cycle with the assistance of the wine. Baiyu Shuang and Ling Long both felt themselves jumping to the advanced Saint Master level, and even Bai Yuntian, who had never materialized her saint weapon, felt the benefits come flowing in her. She had been a third-class Radiant Saint Master before, but a single sip was more than enough to eclipse all of her hard work before to propel her into the 4th class. Chang Wuji had been invited to take a sip as well. For a Heaven Saint Master like him, a sip of the 100-grass wine was only enough to increase his inner saint force by a small increment. The small increase had not been enough to reach a breakthrough like Kafir, the headmaster of Kargath Academy, had. With the wine drunk and the food eaten, Jian Shen followed his parents back to visit his eldest brother, Chang Yanghu. Chang Yanghu was confined to the bed without even the most basic of motor abilities since he had lost his limbs. He couldn't eat or change his clothes without help. A life that was robbed of any freedom of movement was a life that words could hardly begin to describe the cruelty of. The sight of his own older brother in such a wretched state caused Jian Shen's heart to ache. He wanted nothing more than to find a way to become a 7th-class Radiant Saint Master, so he could find some sort method to restore the amputated limbs of Chang Yanghu. On the morning of the 2nd day, Jian Shen visited Lore City to find San's and Kendall's wife. The mother and son had been able to open a rather big inn on one of the more flourishing streets because of the staunch support of the Changyang clan. Business was booming and the patrons flowed in and out like an endless stream of water. With the name of the Changyang clan waved over them, their inn had soon enough become one of the safest inns in the city. No incidents ever took place within their building, meaning that mercenaries and merchants alike could gather here in peace. Farewells were given to the two before Jian Shen flew out of Lore City. He was back in the air headed toward the desolate lands where the flame mercenaries were. Once there, Jian Shen called for an impromptu meeting with the men. Jian Shen, what is the matter for you to rush us like this? As soon as they were gathered within the tent, Ming Dong immediately found his voice to speak up. Seated at his own chair up front, Jian Shen looked at the group with people with a grim expression. Pass on my orders. We will pack up camp and head straight for the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom without rest. The entire group was stunned by this order, and it was Yu who asked a question first, even through the night? Jian Shen, what is the matter? Yes, even through the night. Jian Shen nodded his head. Go and spread the news to everyone. I will be leaving first. Jian Shen, why has the situation become all frantic-like? Has some sort of accident come up or something? Ming Dong cried out. Allow me to keep this a secret for now. I'll tell you about it when we arrive at our destination. Disperse and make the preparations. I'll be leaving first. As soon as he finished speaking, Jian Shen exited the tent and flew off toward the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom with haste. 2 days later, Jian Shen arrived within the territory of the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. Hurrying to recall a mental map of the 7 partitioned territories, Jian Shen then flew off to the Blood Moon Mercenaries' land. As the dominating power in one of the 7 areas, the location of the Blood Moon Mercenaries was found relatively quickly once Jian Shen asked around. Jian Shen had made the rest of the trip in no time at all. The headquarters of the Blood Moon Mercenaries was situated within a revised castle. It did not hide the flying figure of Jian Shen from anyone's sight. With the fact that Jian Shen had not bothered to make his traveling discreet, the captain of the Blood Moon Mercenaries was quickly notified of his arrival. He swiftly moved to welcome him, 1,000 welcomes for the Imperial Protector. What is the current situation? Has news of the tungsten alloy remained a secret? Jian Chen whispered. Here is my report. Everything has been taken care of, and the secret has remained a secret. Aside from a few reliable brothers in arms, not a single outsider knows of it. Even the men of the other 6 factions remain unaware of this secret. Tynes spoke. Nodding his head in satisfaction, Jian Chen replied, Good, you've done well. For your services today, I will reward you nicely in time. For the honor of the Qinhuang Kingdom and the Imperial Protector, it is the honor of mine to serve. Tynes solemnly replied. Jian Chen laughed. Well, where is the location of the mine? Take me there. Yes. Chapter 595, Return to Mercenary City, 1. The distance between the vein of tungsten alloy and the Blood Moon mercenaries had not been too far apart, at about 50 kilometers behind the castle. This location, however, had been surrounded by another 100 kilometers of forests that was vile in both environment and the wildlife alike. Poisonous creatures, swamps, and dangerous beasts all cohabited this one single place. But the location to the vein of tungsten alloy was indeed here. At the very center of this forest was a single cave that could only be seen and entered by through a ravine. Evening in this place was a place with little to no visibility, thanks to the fact that the sun would drop far beneath the horizon and bask the entire forest with darkness. The darkness had been pierced, however, by a single orb of azure and yellow. It had been Jian Chen and Tynes who were traveling to the entrance of the ravine with Jian Chen's flying abilities. The arrival of the 2 figures had immediately alerted the figures hidden in the forest down below. At the sight of Tynes, they had all moved to salute the 2, Captain. Tynes had turned back to look at Jian Chen. Imperial Protector, these are all men of the Earth Saint Master level and are men worthy of my trust to protect the secret of this mine. Satisfactory work. Jian Chen smiled to each and every single one of the men there. Laughing, Tynes spoke to his men next. Scatter yourselves and hide once more. But keep a watch out for anyone else that approaches. Kill them on sight. Yes. Each person saluted in response before transforming back into the shadows and out of sight to blend in with the surrounding of the ravine. Imperial Protector, the vein of tungsten alloy was completely discovered by accident in this ravine. Tynes pointed out. Come, show me the way. Jian Chen and Tynes quickly descended down into the rather shallow and narrow ravine. It was more of a gully rather than ravine due to the fact that there had been grass growing here and there in large quantities. Surveying the grass from above, Jian Chen slowly closed his eyes and allowed his presence to expand into the surrounding 50 kilometers and penetrating any solid wall that might obstruct his way. Under the strong detection abilities of his presence, Jian Chen had been able to see through the boulders and walls as if they weren't even there. But, when his presence snaked into the area below, Jian Chen couldn't help but let out a sigh from his lips. This place was practically a giant mountain of tungsten alloy with a purity that matched perfectly with Tynes' description. The tremendous quantity of the tungsten alloy had been enough to leave even Jian Chen tongue-tied, and with his presence, he had been able to dig 5 meters deep into the ground to probe out the area even more. It had been to his even bigger shock that there was even more tungsten alloy, that what was initially measured the extent in which the vein extended to was more than enough to leave any man utterly inconsolable even. Now knowing the situation behind the hidden cave side, Jian Chen could finally let out a breath in relief. Before, his heart had been pacing wildly from what he was witnessing, but now, he was already back to his original state of mind. And now that his emotions had been completely quelled, Jian Chen began to extend outwards with his presence once more. Deeper and deeper, his presence had started to investigate just how deep this hidden vein of tungsten alloy had gone. With the vast speed of his presence extending into the ground, Jian Chen had soon enough reached roughly 10 kilometers deep into the ground. Thanks to his skill with spreading his presence, Jian Chen could conclude that this had been a very pure vein all in all. The deeper he looked, the purer the vein was. And now that he was 10 kilometers deep, Jian Chen could see that the purity of this vein was at least 90% or perhaps even close to 100. In other words, this was no longer a mine of tungsten alloy but a subterranean area completely made of tungsten alloy. Faced with such a discovery, Jian Shen had been hard-pressed to quell his emotions this time. It had been with such excitement that his entire body began to shake, but he did not stop his investigation and continued onwards. 11 kilometers. 12 kilometers. 13 kilometers. 14 kilometers. Soon enough, Jian Shen had reached his limits to what he could extend to with his presence at 15 kilometers. But at that point, Jian Shen's expression had took on a startled change. Just slightly beneath the 15th kilometer point, Jian Shen could just barely detect an abnormally strong surge of energy with his presence. It was almost as if there had been a barrier preventing him from detecting anything else underneath the protective layering. Even the immensity of the barrier itself was an unknown variable to him. What is that? Jian Shen murmured to himself. This sudden oddity had been far outside Jian Shen's expectations. It had been unfortunate that his presence was not enough to go beyond this 15-kilometer stop point, as he had no other way to investigate what this strange energy was. The next step had been to investigate the surrounding area with his presence before finally withdrawing it. It had been with furrowed eyebrows that he stared down below at the ground as he tried to think. This occurrence had brought a great deal of curiosity onto him and completely overshadowed the joy he felt from the discovery of far down the tungsten alloy went. If only my presence was strong enough. As things stand now, it's futile to try and see what lies beyond that barrier, but I can at the very least explore it in the future. Jian Shen thought to himself. Right by Jian Shen's side, Tynes had noticed the puzzled look on Jian Shen's face and asked out in concern, "Imperial Protector, what is the matter?" "Tynes, what is the history behind this valley? Is there perhaps any legends about this place?" Jian Shen asked. "I have heard no such thing before." Tynes shook his head after racking his mind for any pertinent information. Letting out a sigh in defeat, Jian Shen looked around the entire valley with his presence. For about 20 meters beyond this area, the tungsten alloy had already deteriorated into a purity rate of 50%. And by 50 meters, the amount of tungsten alloy was practically nil, with just stone and dirt left in its place. With the entire valley investigated, Jian Shen could finally ascertain that the heart of the tungsten alloy was located within a diameter of 100 meters of this place. The tungsten alloy at the very heart of the valley was the purest at about 85% purity. Now that his investigations was completely over, Jian Shen and Tynes returned back to the headquarters of the Blood Moon mercenaries. At the very top of the castle in which the Blood Moon mercenaries were located at, Jian Shen could be seen conversing with Tynes and the other high-ranking members of the Blood Moon mercenaries. "Excavate the tungsten alloy as soon as you can while ensuring that no one learns of its existence. There should be no reason that anyone should learn about it. Tynes, I'll leave it up to you to deal with this," Jian Shen commanded. "But, Imperial Protector, the purity of these ores is already an issue to be considered. Combined with the magical properties of the tungsten alloy that makes it 100 times stronger than reinforced steel, a year wouldn't be enough time to make even a single dent in the amount of ores." A black-robed elder spoke. This elder in particular was an Earth Saint Master and a senior figure of the mercenaries. "Imperial Protector, I've already notified the head of the other 6 heads. Should we tell them the news as well? Perhaps have them choose a single reliable person to go extract the ore?" Tynes offered. "Yes, I can agree to that notion. Wait until those 6 arrive and then tell them the news." Jian Shen spoke. Half a month later, the rest of the 6 heads had finally assembled at the headquarters of the Blood Moon mercenaries. With all 7 gathered, Jian Shen could re-engage in another series of secret discussions and allowed for everyone to be delegated on their tasks to extract the ore. This meeting had taken a significantly longer amount of time, as Jian Shen had to discuss several aspects of confidentiality with the 7 Heaven Saint Masters. Preliminary matters such as who would extract the ore, who would transport it, and who would refine it in secret. On the second day, Tynes had immediately led 500 of his most trustworthy men to go extracting the ore on pretense of hunting for magical beasts. Simultaneously, the other 6 leaders had dispatched several of their men in different areas of the mountain range for reconnaissance. With the combined actions of the 7, information of the tungsten alloy had been completely suppressed, and the tungsten alloy was finally being extracted. Under the command of Jian Chen, the entire valley had been surveyed and mined. He had still been very curious about that mysterious barrier several kilometers down beneath the earth, but because of the tungsten alloy in his way, Jian Chen had no way to get closer to it. The only way would be to dig a path down. The next few days had been very calm and peaceful. For the sake of hiding the fact that they were extracting tungsten alloy, Jian Chen had been the only one left to oversee the miners along with Tynes. The other leaders had returned to their own territories so as to avoid any insightful person from connecting the dots and realizing something was amiss. But even with that, the 7 had established a means of quick communication between each other. If there was even the slightest deviation away from the plans, they would all be notified and would arrive at the castle of the Blood Moon mercenaries as fast as they could. 10 days later, the Flame mercenaries had all been rushed to the Blood Moon mercenaries' territory. Finally garrisoning themselves within the castle, the 3 Heaven Saint Masters and 500 Earth Saint Masters had been included into the group, making the Blood Moon mercenaries stronger than before. Jian Chen had not hidden the fact of the tungsten alloy from Ming Dong and the others and had told them about it. But Zhang Tian, the other captains, and the Heaven Saint Masters remained clueless about the ore. When the time came for them to understand the magnitude of the tungsten alloy, each one of them had been so shocked that their jaws dropped wide open. A tremendous deposit of tungsten alloy like this is extremely rare on the continent. Should this make its way out, there will definitely be turmoil all over the place. Even a few of the isolated families or the 8 great powers would mobilize with such an event. With our strength alone, it would be difficult to maintain this. Huang Wan remarked grimly. Equally grim, Jian Chen nodded his head. I've already locked down on the information. If the time comes for this to leak out, then I will have the Qinhuang kingdom step in. My Huang family is strong. If there is a need for it, then I'll have the ancestor of my family step in as well. Chapter 596, Return to Mercenary City, 2. Jian Chen's eyes had lit up when he heard Huang Wan's suggestion. He did not know just how strong the Saint Ruler was, but if he was able to go toe-to-toe with 2 other Saint Rulers, then he would definitely belong to the higher echelons of the chart. In the case that a Saint Ruler did help him, then very few people would dare work against him. Wait until for the situation to arise first before we call on your ancestor to help us. Jian Chen smiled. Aside from the 4 imperial protectors from the Qinhuang kingdom, he had also the ancestor of the Huang family to help him. With those 5, Jian Chen had no desire to use them at the wrong moment. As for Ming Dong's uncle figure, Jian Chen had no delusions that he would be able to ask for his assistance. The Saint Ruler was very unwilling to complicate himself with any external affairs, and even the priceless tungsten alloy would not be enough to shake his neutrality. But there had been no leaks of the information at all in regards to the tungsten alloy. Aside from Jian Chen's group, only the 7 leaders and their men had known about it. The excavators had all their storage items confiscated during their time in the mines in order to prevent news or evidence from being spread. Even their movements had been limited to only 10 meters beyond the mines. The Flame mercenaries had been stationed within the castle of the Blood Moon mercenaries whilst all of this was going on. When the 7 leaders heard that it was Jian Chen himself who led the group, they had immediately announced their own desires to join the Flame mercenaries. And now, with the inclusion of those 7, the Flame mercenaries had exploded once more in strength. The entirety of the land that had been the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom was fully engulfed by Jian Chen, and the amount of experts within the land had been plentiful. Aside from Jian Chen, there were nearly a dozen other Heaven Saint Masters included amongst the mercenaries, making the Flame mercenaries a household name within the surrounding 100,000 kilometers. The following days had been calm in comparison to the news from above, with the tungsten alloy being extracted methodically. Every day, an abundant amount of the ore would be collected, and the key figures in the operation such as Jian Chen had been all the happier to see it. When all of the tungsten alloy is extracted, we'd definitely have enough to use them for our city. Ming Dong spoke with a quavering voice. If this tungsten alloy were to be used to build the city, then the defensive strength it would boast would be enough to be one of the strongest cities on the continent. Even the 7 capital cities would be equal to us. Even the normally quiet-spoken Du Gufeng had been filled with an expectant look in his eyes. We could even use the tungsten alloy to create a large amount of armor for the elite soldiers to wear. Bai Lian piped up in excitement. Everyone had been quick to suggest what they should do with the tungsten alloy. All they needed to do was wait for a definitive number of just how much tungsten alloy had been mined, and they could go ahead with their plan. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed for Jian Chen's stay in the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom. Nothing out of the ordinary had happened within these 3 months, and the lockdown on the tungsten alloy had been as strict as ever. The tension from safeguarding this secret had been extremely large on Jian Chen's heart. However, early one morning, Jian Chen had only just opened his eyes from his seated position on his bed to look out the window. In his mind, memories of the little fatty he met in Longevity Valley suddenly cropped up out of nowhere. I promised to meet him again in a single year after I left the valley. It's about time that I make true on that promise and visit the valley. Jian Chen muttered as he stepped out from his room. In the past few months, he had remembered about that fatty several times, but because of the matters on hand, he had to put off the trip until later. But now that there was no foreseeable changes in the extraction of the tungsten alloy, he saw no need to delay the trip to Longevity Valley any longer. As soon as he walked out from his room, Jian Chen had convened with the others once more to announce that he would be leaving for a short period of time. Jian Chen, where are you going? Let me go with you. Huang Wan asked in reluctance to part away from Jian Chen again. I have an important matter to return to Mercenary City for. But I'll be home soon enough, so remain here in the meanwhile. Jian Chen shook his head to decline. A disappointed look appeared in her eyes after that. Jian Chen, go quick and return early. Yu had been equally reluctant to part with Jian Chen. Despite her reluctance, however, she knew that this trip was unavoidable for him. Nodding his head, Jian Chen spoke, if nothing happens, I should be home soon. Ming Dong walked forward to slap Jian Chen on the shoulder to speak seriously, brother, if you need to go, then we will not stop you. But you have to be careful. In the case that the Jetta clan and the Shi family see you, you must head for Mercenary City. They won't dare touch you there. Laughing, Jian Chen replied, worry not. I know just how to handle that should the situation occur. But aside from their saint rulers, I should have no problem with the rest of their families. Out of nowhere, Bai Lian had cropped up around his arm. Cousin, your little relative has a wish that I hope you can fulfill. She spoke. Seeing the coquettish actions of his younger cousin, Jian Chen could only laugh. Say it then. Whatever it is that you want, your cousin will make sure to accomplish it for you. For his own younger cousin, Jian Chen was a very doting figure. Whirling her head to look at the little tiger on Jian Chen's shoulder, she spoke with a mischievous smile. Could you leave behind Xiao Bai? I want to play with it. The tiger was a very intelligent creature and had understood exactly what Bai Lian was asking for. As quick as lightning, it had jumped over from Jian Chen's left shoulder to right shoulder to avoid Bai Lian and hugged at Jian Chen's neck tightly with its paws and eyes that stared vigilantly at Bai Lian. As if annoyed by what the tiger cub had done, Bai Lian stared at it with her arms at her waist. Xiao Bai, am I really that scary? I fed you some roasted meat the past few days, and this is how you repay me? You won't even let me hug you. Mroror. Xiao Bai had let loose a mournful sound that not everyone had understood. But its paws had only gripped around Jian Chen's neck, even tiger, meaning that it was very reluctant to split with Jian Chen. Forget it, Bai Lian. Xiao Bai may as well be Jian Chen's shadow. You'd have a better chance climbing the ladder into the heavens than to separate Xiao Bai from Jian Chen. Yu giggled. Bai Lian, this is a request that I can't help you with. I am not one to force Xiao Bai to do what it doesn't want. Jian Chen smiled apologetically. Forget it then. Bai Lian glared balefully at Xiao Bai in disappointment. With Xiao Bai on his shoulders still, Jian Chen bade farewell to the rest of the group and left. He had originally wanted to leave Shao by here instead of carrying it over with him, since he would have to pass Mercenary City to reach Longevity Valley. It was a trip that did not guarantee security, but the tiger cub had been completely deaf to any words Jian Chen had said to it. Unable to convince the tiger cub, he could only allow for the cub to go with him. It had been extraordinarily good weather today. The sun was shining bright and not a single cloud could be seen, leaving the sky a boundless canvas of azure. Flying 1,000 meters high into the sky, Jian Chen headed straight for the Dazhou Kingdom so that he could use their space gate to reach Mercenary City. Because of the growth that the tiger cub went through, its sense of smell had improved by several degrees as well. Every so often when Jian Chen flew over a forest, it would just barely be able to sniff out the heavenly resources hidden throughout the verdant plants. Some had been over 1,000 years old in age and shocked even Jian Chen. It had been as Rum Guinness had said, the tiger cub would gain the ability to search and find heavenly resources with its own strength. It took several days for Jian Chen to arrive at the frontier of the Dazhou Kingdom, but as soon as he hit that line, Jian Chen came to a stop mid-flight. Thinking for a bit longer, he immediately flew off in a different direction than before. Just several hours after he had changed directions, Jian Chen had left the Dazhou Kingdom and arrived at the bordering kingdom of the Wuxia Kingdom. Heading within its borders, Jian Chen flew straight for the first-class city, Wuxia City. Within the area of the city, Jian Chen touched down onto a relatively empty location and followed his memories through the city before finally coming to a stop right outside a large mansion. The mansion that Jian Chen had stopped in front of had a giant signboard right above it saying, Tianqin Clan. These two words had a seemingly magical feeling to them and brought forth a deluge of memories from several years ago. Unable to stop himself, Jian Chen began to replay the memories of when he and Ming Dong first came to this city. In Wuxia City, it had been Qin Shao that had left the biggest impression on Jian Chen. "Hey, you there. What are you doing spacing out in front of the gates of the Tianqin clan? Get lost, this isn't a place you can block the road." In the middle of Jian Chen's thoughts, one of the guards had let out a shout and disrupted him. Waking back up to reality, Jian Chen looked at the burly figure next to him and cupped his hands in a polite greeting. "Would you perhaps know if the young master, Qin Shao, is inside?" Stopping in his stride to size Jian Chen up, the guard had taken notice that the robes Jian Chen wore was quite expensive, and the air to him had been unordinary. Immediately growing wary, the guard asked, "Who are you?" "The young master Qin Shao is not someone that anyone could see on a whim. This one is Jian Chen, a friend of the young master Qin Shao." Jian Chen cupped his hands. Despite this person being only a guard, he had been calm and polite to him. "What? You're Jian Chen?" The guard had immediately been surprised to hear that name. Straight away, the expression on his face had changed to have a smile on it. "So it is indeed Lord Jian Chen. This lowly guard must be blind if I could not recognize Lord Jian Chen. Please forgive me, Lord Jian Chen." The young master Qin Shao had said before that should Lord Jian Chen arrive, we are to bring him straight in. The guard welcomed Jian Chen within the compound politely while then notifying another guard to report to Qin Shao. Chapter 597, Return to Mercenary City, 3, received once more into the Tianqin clan. Jian Chen had been once more honored into the compound just like with his last arrival here. Even the head and the senior figures of the clan had made their way over to the halls to greet Jian Chen. Jian Chen was after all, the king of mercenaries, and a figure that the Tianqin clan would not dare bear arrogance with. Even as he was being warmly received, Jian Chen had finally met up with Qin Shao once more. Years may have gone past, but there had been no significant changes in Qin Shao, whether it was in personality or body. There had been a tremendous increase in his strength however, as he was now an Earth Saint Master. The moment when Qin Shao saw Jian Chen, he had been ecstatic and wrapped him into a hug. "Hey, Jian Chen. I've been waiting for you return. Any later, and I would have gone looking for you instead." Untying himself from the embrace, Jian Chen gave a cursory appraisal of Qin Shao before approving of the change. Not bad, you've become an Earth Saint Master. What a talent you have. If I'm not wrong, you've only just hit the age of 30. A 30-year-old becoming an Earth Saint Master, that's an achievement that the entire Tianyuan continent would regard as true talent. Replying for his son, the head of the Tianqin clan laughed with pride. Qiner is talented indeed. Even in our Wuxia kingdom, there is not a single person that holds as much potential as he does. Just half a year ago, the king himself had betrothed his daughter to Qiner. Many of the other factions of the kingdom have already tried their hand at arranging a marriage as well. Nodding at the man, Jian Chen looked to Qin Shao. Qin Shao, is that true? You're wedded now? There had been an embarrassed look on Qin Zhao's face when faced with the question. Laughing, he said, the wedding day has already been established. In 2 years' worth of time, I will be wed to the third princess of the Wuxia kingdom. Jian Chen, you and Ming Dong have to make sure that you will attend my wedding. Of course we will. Jian Chen laughed with joy over Tianqin's excitement. Moving on, Jian Chen and Qin Shao had walked deeper within the courtyards of the clan to talk as they pleased. Entirely out of the blue, Qin Shao blurted out a single question as soon as they were alone. Jian Chen, although I am not of the same level of strength as brother Ming Dong, I am still an Earth Saint Master and a man capable of my own decisions. I've stayed within the Tianqin clan long enough. Would it be possible for me to follow you in your travels through the continent? Really? Of course you can. As things turn out, I have founded a mercenary group that is short of people I can trust at the moment. If you're willing, why not join my mercenary group? Jian Chen laughed. Coincidentally enough, Qin Shao began with a bright look in his eyes. I had been entertaining the notion of creating a mercenary group with you. But since you've beaten me to the punch, then I'll save my breath. Jian Chen, when will we leave then? Staying around in the Tianqin clan has bored me to death. I've had half a mind to leave earlier already. Evasively, Jian Chen shook his head when he saw the impatient look on Qin Zhao's face. I estimate that there'll be some time before then. I've still a trip to Mercenary City and the surrounding area. When I come back from then, I'll be able to bring you over to the mercenary group I've made to take a look. Not even a moment after Jian Chen finished speaking, the gentle and refined sounds of a zither could be heard being played. The notes had been delightful and pleasant to the ears, as if they were filled with an enchanting type of magic to captivate any listener. The music had been so much that Qin Shao and Jian Chen had stopped in their conversation for just a moment. By listening to the music of HT zither, the two of them had grown calm and tranquil like undisturbed water. At a pavilion nearby, a single white-robed young woman could be seen seated on a stone table as she plucked at the strings of her zither. It was almost as if the entire world around her had harmonized with her music, as even the flowers and the grass nearby would sway and turn with the rhythm of the beat and the wind would harmonize with her notes. Right. My younger sister enjoys playing the zither in her spare time. Compared to the past, her ability in playing it has improved so much that even I can't help but feel intoxicated by the music she plays. Qin Shao sighed in approval of his sister's music. Yes, your sister has grown skillful in the art of the zither if she is able to influence the heart and mind of a human with her music. Jian Chen agreed. The effects of her music had been more than enough for Jian Chen to really believe was possible. Calmly walking over to the pavilion with Qin Shao, the two of them sat at a nearby table to listen to the next ballad of the zither without disturbing her. If the second daughter of the Tianqin clan saw Jian Chen and Qin Shao enter her audience of one, she did not make notice of it. Even her eyes had remained unmoving as she focused completely on her zither to play earnestly. In this one moment, her eyes were solely glued on her zither and nothing else in the world had mattered to her. The ballad continued on for some time before finally receding away into silence. Her tender fingers paused in its movements as she lifted her eyes away from the zither at last and then onto Jian Chen and Qin Shao who were nearby. Her eyes had registered them with a bright gleam of light that contained a lively look to them as if it were sentient. Yet, her face had been covered by a single piece of cloth when she smiled at the two, making her exact appearance unclear. Brother, my apologies, I've kept you waiting. My lord Jianchen, I had no idea you would come in either. There had been a faint smile on Jianchen's own face when he nodded, but when he was about to speak, Qin Shao had cut in first. Sister, you spend more than enough time wearing that veil outside, why do you wear it in our own home as well? Wearing this veil has become something of a habit for me. To take it off now would be a strange change. She replied softly. Turning to Jianchen, she spoke, if I remember correctly, the last time we met, Lord Jianchen, it was a year ago. Have you been well since our last meeting? A bright smile appeared on his face. Worry not, this one has done well. On the other hand, you seem to have made great progress in the art of the zither, I see. This girl has been studying the art of the zither for as long as she's lived. Every day I try my best to study and dedicate myself to the art. Even now, my skills are still lacking in comparison to someone like the famous heavenly enchantress. Jianchen's heart had skipped a beat when he heard mention of that name. Perhaps you wish to follow the heavenly enchantress' footsteps and wish to delve into the way of the zither rather than Saint Force? I'd bet so. My sister has always been a smart one with a power of comprehension stronger than others. Even her skill in cultivation is decent, but what made my father disappointed was her lack of motivation to continue with her cultivation. As a result, she is only at the 5th layer of Saint Force and spends her time focusing on the zither instead. Although the ballads she plays are captivating, it's rather useless against an enemy. Qin Shao shrugged his shoulders noncommittally. The fact that his own sister was so entranced by the zither had been a source of a headache for him since he did not see any applicable way it could be used for cultivation. Even though her brother had criticized the usefulness of the zither, she did not grow angry. Instead, she explained, Brother, you underestimate the zither. I have not yet reached the beginning steps of the way of the zither, that's all. The profound mysteries of the music that a zither produces is something you couldn't possibly imagine. In the case that one truly embarks on this path of cultivation, then the fighting prowess they bring is far beyond what Saint Force could compare to. Aside from the heavenly enchantress, I have never heard of anyone else using the music of a zither as a way of cultivation. Sister, you don't have any guidance nor teachings on how to embark on this path. To try and find this path by yourself is difficult, why not just cultivate with Saint Force instead? Qin Shao pleaded. But she had shaken her head in response, this is what I plan to do with my life. I will use all of my energy to accomplish my goal, and even if there lies nothing at the end of my path, I will not regret it. Qin Shao, if your sister is so set on this path, then let her walk the path she chooses. Although the music your sister plays is far below what is needed to fully captivate the soul of a person, it has reached a point of maturity in its own right. As long as she continues to practice and study, your sister will grow and learn. She will definitely reach the way of the zither she talks of. Qin Shao could only sigh in response to Jianchen's words. In his mind, he really couldn't approve of the arduous path his sister set for herself. Thank your Lord Jianchen for your encouragement. My name is Qin. Please feel free to call me so in the future rather than sister of Qin Shao, my lord. She smiled. But behind the veil, the smile had been hard to distinguish. Qin. Jianchen spoke to herself, so your name was that? It is a delightful sounding name that suits a lady like yourself. The lively light in Qin's eyes danced as she looked at Jianchen and nodded. Without another word, her eyes went back to the old-looking zither on the table and her fingers moved to caress the strings of it once more to induce a melodious sound. Looking at the zither, Jianchen hesitated for a moment. Miss Qin, this one has once had the pleasure of meeting the heavenly enchantress in Mercenary City before. In the future should I meet her again, this one will ask to see if she will impart any guidance onto you. Qin's eyes had lit up at the sound of that. Then I will be in your care, my lord, to ask for the heavenly enchantress to be my master. That alone has been the greatest desire of mine since young. Jianchen had not remained in the Tianqin clan long after that. Talking briefly with Qin Shao and Qin for a moment longer, he finally left the clan after a small discussion with Qin Shao about the next thing he had to accomplish. Leaving behind Walorant City, Jian Chen flew back towards the Dazhou Kingdom once more. Afterwards, it had been an uneventful trip as Jian Chen finally crossed over into the Dazhou Kingdom and into the palace where he had the king welcome him in. There had been no obstructions for Jian Chen to use the space gate to travel hundreds of thousands of kilometers to reappear on the other side in the forests near Mercenary City. Confirming his own position on a map, Jian Chen rose into the air and shot off away into the skies towards the city. He had planned on entering Mercenary City to not only buy several things for Elder Shou, but he had also hoped that there would be anything else worthy of his notice in the city. Chapter 598, Return to Mercenary City. 4. Mercenary City was situated at the very center of the entire continent as if to serve as the heart of the land. Although there were no walls, the territory that the city spanned over was no less than the 7 capital cities. In name, it was the most well-known city in the continent. And in the heart of every single mercenary, Mercenary City was the very symbol of divinity. As the holy grounds for every mercenary, the name of the city itself represented freedom and peace. Within Mercenary City, a series of complicated regulations and laws were put into place to uphold the security and peace of the city. There was no division between the strong and the weak. Even if it was a Heaven Saint Master, their status was no different than from the common villager. Everywhere else on the continent, the law of the jungle reigned supreme. But here, that law was non-existent. Fighting was prohibited within the area of the city, and the very moment any single person entered the city, even the strongest wouldn't be able to use their strength without fearing the consequences. This prohibition had thus led to many people referring to Mercenary City as the safest asylum to live in. As long as one lived here, there would be no need to worry about being chased down and killed by anyone. In the course of history, there had been plenty of people that disregarded this law and broke it. But each and every single one of these lawbreakers had been killed without mercy, even the Heaven Saint Masters. Coincidentally, there had never been a case of murder that happened within the city. The only thing that could serve to establish your status within the city was money. With money, one would be able to live a life that even a prince would envy. Without money, one would have to live on the streets, even finding food would prove to be a challenge. With the tiger cub in hand, Jian Chen flew across the skies at a steady pace. From afar, a series of large buildings could be seen stretching into the skies. From above, Jian Chen could just barely see the transparent barrier that surrounded the entirety of the city. His eyes carefully studied the barrier with curiosity. He had only been to Mercenary City once before, but even that had only given him a small portion of information when it came to the city. He knew of several things such as the fact that it was forbidden to fight within the city, and that the barrier that spanned across the sky had to do with that prohibition. Because of the fact that Mercenary City had no walls, a series of roads and streets intersected one another throughout the entire area. With roads leading in and out of the place, mercenaries could travel through the city along with their carts in numerous amounts. Despite the fact that there were no guards stationed anywhere, none of these mercenaries had acted as unruly as they might be out in the wildlands of the continent. No matter where they were in the city, they acted nice and polite. Touching down onto the ground several kilometers away from the barrier, Jian Chen walked the rest of the way. Without a care for the nearly transparent barrier, he walked through and into Mercenary City. As soon as he entered the city, Jian Chen bought a Class 3 magical beast for him to ride throughout the city. Combined with the fact that Mercenary City was large and that Jian Chen was prohibited from flying, Jian Chen would have to ride a magical beast mount if he wished to get to his destination swiftly. Riding on top of the magical beast, Jian Chen traveled slowly through the major streets of the city to buy all sorts of delicacies from the street stalls. These were all gifts for the natives of Longevity Valley, Little Fatty most especially. He had never once traveled outside the valley and knew nothing about the outside world. This by extension meant that he had never once experienced the delicacies of the continent. For half the day, Jian Chen walked through the streets. Using the money saved in his space ring, Jian Chen had gone on a wild shopping spree and had managed to fill up 5 whole space belts before he had been satisfied. Hopping onto his mount, Jian Chen then rode straight for the drugstores. About an hour later, Jian Shen arrived at a 5-layered pavilion. This was where all sorts of priceless heavenly resources could be bought and sold from within the city. Moreover, as soon as Jian Shen and the tiger cub arrived in front of the pavilion, the tiger cub had caught a whiff of the fragrant aroma from the heavenly resources. Calling out with excitement from its spot in Jian Shen's robe with such force, if not for the tight grip Jian Shen had on it, the cub would have dashed into the pavilion. He had tried his best to hide the faint smile on his face when he saw the impatience of the cub. Heavenly resources all over the age of 1,000 were very rare in the Jessen kingdom, and so it had gone for a very long time without tasting such a delicacy like that. With the cub in hand, Jian Shen strode into the pavilion. There were plenty of other customers shopping around the place, ranging from mercenary to merchant to attendants dashing around the place to help service everyone. From their mouths, talks of discussion about what item to buy could be heard. Several of the mercenaries could be seen buying even the several hundred-year-old ones. Looking around the place, Jian Shen could see that the first story of the pavilion sold several priceless drugs, but not a single heavenly resource could be seen. This way of merchandise selling was not unfamiliar to Jian Shen. He knew that the more expensive wares would be on the higher levels of the pavilion. So without further ado, Jian Shen walked up to the second story. On this level, the more expensive types of drugs could be seen along with several heavenly resources. The ages of these ones were below the age of 500, but even here on this second floor had plenty of customers. Again, without looking around, Jian Shen headed for the third floor. But when he reached the stairwell entrance, a guard moved to stop him. "My apologies, sire, but the third floor onwards is restricted to customers with a purple card." This guard spoke apologetically. Without a word, Jian Shen flashed several purple cards for the man to see. At the sight of them, the guard had relinquished the path to allow for Jian Shen to continue on his way with a smile. Compared to the second floor, the third floor was quite peaceful. Only a few scant people could be seen haggling prices with the attendants here. And on this floor, Jian Shen could finally see some of the more sealed heavenly resources displayed here and there. Right below the caseboard, their prices were clearly written with a bottom-line price of 10,000 purple coins. Some of the more ancient wares had surpassed even 15,000 purple coins, that had been an exorbitant price. The 1,000-year-old heavenly resources had caused the tiger cub to open its eyes wide and start to lick its lips in anticipation. "My lord, how may I serve you today?" A 20-something-year-old woman attendant suddenly came into view. Slowly walking up to one of the more well-preserved heavenly resources, Jian Shen spoke, "I wish to speak some business with you. Have your shopkeeper come out to talk." She had looked at Jian Shen oddly, but without any further complaint, she went off to look for the shopkeeper. Soon enough, a middle-aged woman with grandiose-looking robes came following the previous attendant in. Coming to a stop right in front of Jian Shen, the attendant smiled and introduced Jian Shen to the man. "My lord, this figure here is the shopkeeper." Looking Jian Shen up and down, the woman gave a small smile on her face. "My name is Okire, shopkeeper of this pavilion. Might I ask to know your name, my lord? You give me a familiar feeling, as if I have seen your visage somewhere before." Smiling in return, Jian Shen spoke, "Shopkeeper Okire, let us talk business. Does your store happen to have any heavenly resources over the age of 1,000? Seeing that Jian Shen was unwilling to disclose his identity, Okire had decided not to push it any further and smiled. "Certainly, we have several of those heavenly resources in stock, but not by much. In total, there are 28 of them over the age of 1,000. My lord, if you are asking such a question, do you perhaps mean to purchase them?" "Shopkeeper Okire, please calculate the total price of the 28 then." Jian Shen replied. The woman had been taken aback. Uncertain of how to phrase the question, she asked anyways, "My lord, do you mean to say that you wish to purchase all 28 of them? That will certainly not be a small sum of money." Jian Shen nodded his head and spoke no more of the issue. With that confirmation, a smile had lit up on Okire's face. A customer purchasing over 20,000-year-old heavenly resources was an extremely rare sight to be seen. Hurriedly taking out an abacus, Okire started to total up the sum of all the items. My lord, she began. Each of the 28 heavenly resources have varying ages. Some are just 1,000 years old, some are 2,000 or 3,000 years old. Combined with the fact that some of them are of rare species, each one of the heavenly resources will be of different prices. As such, the cumulative price will be 1,030,000 purple coins. If my lord is willing to purchase them in bulk, then we will discount the remaining 30,000 purple coins for a grand total of 1,000,000 purple coins. Is that to your satisfaction? Correct. Then the 28 heavenly resources will be bought for 1,000,000 purple coins. Jianshen handed a purple card over to Okire. He knew somewhat of the pricing of heavenly resources, and so even though the ages of the heavenly resources were all different, Jianshen knew that the price given to him had been a very fair one. In the smaller cities, heavenly resources such as these would be priced for far higher. Taking the purple card into her trembling hands, Okire spoke. Should my lord ever come to my pavilion for any future 1,000-year-old heavenly resources, this servant here will be sure to give a favorable price. With a small hum to himself, Jianshen spoke. Shopkeeper Okire, would you perhaps have any heavenly resources over the age of 10,000? What? Heavenly resources above the age of 10,000? Okire had been astounded. Regarding Jianshen with a stupefied look, she answered, My lord, how could heavenly resources of that age possibly be that easy to find? 10,000-year-old heavenly resources are something that the entire Tianyuan continent can only stumble upon once in a while. Not only are they impossible to find in markets, each time one appeared, they are worth countless of purple coins. They are something that could allow people to become anew and are known to many as ingredients to immortality. Many of the experts standing at the zenith of the continent would use such things to extend their lifespans even. Perhaps shopkeeper Okire knows of a place where such heavenly resources could be purchased at. Jianshen pressed on. Pausing to think for a moment, Okire then finally responded, according to what I know, 10,000-year-old heavenly resources are all rare. With each appearance of one, they have shown up in only the capital cities and mercenary city. To my knowledge, they have appeared once every 3 years or so amongst the 7 capital cities, and once a year here. A tremendous auction house always follows 2 days after its announcement, so if my lord is still in need of one, then your best luck would be at the auction house. Chapter 599, Spirit of the Barrier, 1, Shopkeeper Okire, thank you for your information. Jianshen cupped his hands in gratitude. But where might this yearly auction house take place? There are plenty of auction houses in this city after all. Perhaps you are not as familiar to Mercenary City as I thought if you know not even this, my lord. Okire spoke in between a small burst of laughter. Then, please allow this servant to explain. There are indeed plenty of auction houses within Mercenary City, but those are all privately owned auction houses. There is only a single auction house that is regulated by the entire Mercenary City. As long as my lord makes the proper inquiries, you will learn of the place almost instantly. It is how this auction house is run and what it sells that marks it different from the others. With Mercenary City itself running the auction every year, many extremely rare objects can be seen from it, ergo the 10,000-year-old heavenly resource. They have always been sold off by this auction house. Relevantly, the 10,000-year-old heavenly resource that my lord wishes for will always appear here. But each time they appear, it has always been a fight of money to purchase it. If my lord is adamant on purchasing it, then you must prepare yourself to use a large sum of purple coins to purchase it. Indeed, thank you for your warning. Jianshen replied gratefully. The shopkeeper smiled, My lord, you are far too polite. This is nothing that could warrant your thanks. The future patronage of my lord would be more than enough to keep this servant happy. She spoke before handing the purple coins back to Jianshen after processing it. Taking out an exquisite space belt, she handed it over to Jianshen, My lord, here is your purple card and the heavenly resources are within this belt. Please hold it well. Obediently taking the purple card back into his own space ring, Jian Shen took the space belt and inspected the inner contents to ensure everything was there. Smiling, he stored it away into his space ring and left the pavilion after bidding farewell to Okire. Freely walking up to the windowsill, Okire watched as Jian Shen walked further and further away into the streets. With furrowed eyebrows, she began to mutter to herself, "Just who is that person? It is strange to think that he is familiar to me, as if I've seen him somewhere before. But I have never left Mercenary City as of late, and the amount of acquaintances I have is very few. Where could I have possibly met a youngster like this before?" Taking the Class 3 magical beast mount for a ride, Jian Shen held a radish-shaped heavenly resource for the tiger cub to munch on. With bright and spirited eyes, the cub devoured the entire thing happily. Heavenly resources for the tiger cub were an extremely rare and delicious delicacy. They were the most delicious and blessed objects in the world to the cub. Eyeing the cub with a small trace of adoration, Jian Shen could not help but smile fondly. In the short period of time the cub had been in Jian Shen's care, it had managed to worm its way into his heart, so to see the tiger cub so happy had made him feel equivalently happy. By asking the people of the city, Jian Shen had managed to find out the auction house Okire had been talking about. At the center of Mercenary City, this auction house was extremely large and stood at about 30 meters tall. Grand and impressive in its architecture even in comparison to the mighty city it was in, this auction house was very distinguishable, like the head of a beast out in the open plains. Right as Jian Shen was about to take another step, Ziying's voice suddenly popped into his mind. "Ah! Master! This is stardust. Master, we've found some stardust." Repeating Ziying's words, Qingsua spoke up excitedly, "Master, quickly now. Take the stardust with you, that is a priceless item needed to forge the sword." Ignited by the words of Ziying and Qingsua, Jian Shen could feel a joyous smile appear on his lips. He knew that in order to craft the azulate swords, he would need a specific amount of materials. And as long as he had those materials, he would be one step closer to forging the said swords. Excited by the two spirits, Jian Shen began to question the two, Ziying, Qingsua, "Where is this stardust located?" He had no idea what stardust looked like, and so if it were not for the two spirits, he would simply never be able to distinguish it from the entire city. Right away, a strange but mysterious sensation began to pull at his mind as he spoke. In this moment, he could feel a strange attraction, as if some sort of magical connection was drawing him to a very specific location. When Jian Shen's eyes hovered over the auction house run by Mercenary City in front of him, a response from within his head could be felt. With this sensation, he could more or less surmise a general approximation that the stardust would be located within this auction house. "Master, you must take the stardust. As long as stardust is added to the swords when being forged, the quality of the blade will go up to a completely different level. It is far away from being a weapon for a god, it can still be considered an ultimate magic weapon." The excited voice of Qingsua reverberated through Jian Shen's mind. "Stardust is a material used for weapons of the immortal level. I never would have imagined that they would appear even here. Master, no matter what the cost, you must obtain them." Ziying spoke urgently. It would appear that stardust was an extremely important item to it. Seeing just how much Ziying and Qingsua was putting emphasis on the stardust, Jian Shen could feel himself growing serious. His eyes fixated themselves onto the auction house and immediately dismounted from his magical beast mount to enter. This stardust might have been in the auction house, but the actual house had not yet started any of their auctions and was thus unavailable to the audience. It would be at least another 2 days before it would start, perhaps the stardust would appear then. Afterwards, Jian Shen had spent the rest of his time walking the streets. Going from one drugstore to another, he purchased another 50 or so thousand-year-old heavenly resources and spent well over 2 million purple coins. The stab in his wallet had not been a stab to his heart, however. The growth of the tiger was far more important than money, and since the tiger required an exponentially large amount of time to grow, heavenly resources were the only way to expedite this procedure. Jianshan wasn't short on money either, since he took the purple coins from the space rings of the Heaven Saint Masters he killed along with any other valuable item. There was still the money from the treasuries of both the Pingyang Kingdom and the Heavenly Eagle Kingdom that he had not yet exhausted, along with the monster cores. These alone were enough to make Jianshan into a mobile treasury with the raw amount of value he had on him. It was only until dusk that Jianshan finally stopped his window shopping spree through the streets and settled in one of the inns to wait for the auction 2 days from now. There would undoubtedly be heavenly resources over the age of several thousand years old at this auction house, as well as the stardust needed to forge the azulate swords. This meant that the upcoming auction event would definitely be an event that Jianshan couldn't afford to miss. In the same vein, this meant that Jianshan would have to delay his trip to Longevity Valley for another 2 days. Later that evening, in his own grand room, Jianshan sat on top of his bed in the midst of concentration. He had wanted to try his best to come to understand the energy of the world along with the piece of a saint-tier battle skill to become a saint ruler as soon as possible. By his side, the tiger cub wolfed down 3 heavenly resources and quickly fell into a deep slumber to process it into energy. The candle wick within the room had long since gone out, leaving the entire room in pitch-black darkness. Even if one's hand were in front of one's face, the fingers would not be visible at all. But in this darkness, the room was exceptionally quiet, so that even a needle could be heard if it were dropped onto the ground. In the skies above Mercenary City, the gigantic barrier that had spanned across the entire city pulsated once. Shortly afterwards, a single girl's voice could just barely be heard from the skies. This is Master's scent. But, didn't Master leave this world already? Why do I smell his scent then? Did Master return then? This clear voice had been clear in the dark skies over the city, but even with the peacefully quiet city, the sound did not travel far. Yes, this is Master's scent. But it's faint. Very faint. Did Master really return? The clear voice reverberated through the skies. From the voice, however, the tint of excitement could be heard. Soon enough, the wave of excitement sped into the city and caused everyone to feel slightly odd, but no one could pinpoint the reason why. I've found it. It's here. Master's scent is definitely coming from here. Master has to have returned. This must be his way of testing me. How good my nose is. No matter how faint Master's scent is, I will definitely always be able to find it. The voice spoke, this time closer to the city. It had already traveled to the inn Jianshan was in and phased into the building. From within his room, Jianshan's ear twitched slightly and caused his eyes to open suddenly. At the same time, 2 bolts of light flew out from his eyes and illuminated the candlewick in the room to light up the room. Jianshan's eyes swept across the room vigilantly. The darkness was not a problem to him since he could see everything clearly. Who's speaking? Jianshan asked seriously. He had heard that clear voice earlier, but his presence had told him no one was around at all, causing him to be extra vigilant. Even if Mercenary City was extremely safe, he could not afford to drop his guard. It's faint. Very faint. Master's scent is here. This time, the strange voice could be heard originating from the same room Jianshan was in. It had been extremely clear to hear, but no matter how much Jianshan looked around, he could not see just what human or ghost was speaking. Chapter 600, Spirit of the Barrier, 2. Bolting straight up from his bed, Jianshan landed gracefully onto the ground with his eyes staring hard at the entirety of the room. With his presence completely spread out so that the entire inn was covered in it, he began to test to see just who was there. But what had disappointed him was the fact that not a single being came into his detection. He had clearly heard the distinguishable voice of a person nearby him earlier. It was not of the same skill that a saint ruler would use to pitch their voice, since a saint ruler would use it to speak directly into the ear. This voice was different. It was a clear voice that anyone within earshot would be able to hear and detect the origin of. But even though it came from his side, the strange and bone-chilling thing was the fact that not a single living thing or spirit could be seen. Who is speaking? Come out now. Jian Chen commanded with a solemn face. This was a first that he had never seen before. As if responding to Jian Chen's question, a previously dark spot near the corner of his room suddenly began to glow with light. Wisps of light began to gather in this one spot and slowly condense to show the silhouette of a person. As the light dissipated from the room, a single young woman who looked to be around 23 years old came into view. She had been quite cute and was slightly pink to the eyes. But the only defect in this otherwise beautiful figure was the fact that her body was eerily fake. It was not an actual human body and looked to be made from only light. Following her appearance, light filled the room and dispersed any remaining darkness from it. The iris in Jian Chen's eyes dilated as he stared at the young woman as if he had seen a ghost. "Who are you?" Jian Chen growled. Against this foreign threat with untold power, Jian Chen was extremely vigilant. This girl could be an evil being after all. Curiously, the young woman stared at Jian Chen before circling around him several times. Even while she walked around him, her eyes never left his body as she muttered, "It's faint. Master's scent is very faint. But you are clearly not my master." "Hey, who are you then?" Her words had rendered Jian Chen at a loss. Scratching his head in befuddlement, Jian Chen had still remained calm throughout this. "This one is Jian Chen." "Just who might you be? Why have you come to my room?" "Jian Chen." Her eyebrows rose up as if she was thinking heavily. "Who's Jian Chen?" "Jian Chen would be me." The muscle in Jian Chen's face twitched. Looking at Jian Chen, the young woman asked, "You're Jian Chen?" No, you're not my master. My master's name isn't Jian Chen. He isn't as weak as you are either." "Weird, why do I smell master's scent then? Did I smell wrong?" "No way. There's no way I would mistake master's scent for someone else. No matter how faint, I will be able to find it." Her eyes then spun around the room several times along with her face as she laughed and giggled at Jian Chen. "Big brother, why don't you tell little spirit if you've seen my master before? Where is my master? Why has he not come back in forever? Does he not want little spirit anymore, or even worse, did master forget about me?" At the last few words, the young woman's eyes began to grow red as if she was ready to cry at any moment with sorrow. Seeing just how pathetic the young woman was getting, Jian Chen felt an emotion tug away at him from within. It was almost as if he was looking at a small child sadly despairing over the separation from her parents. She was alone and helpless, a pitiful creature to the eyes. "Little sister, why don't you tell me who you are? Who is your master? Perhaps I might have seen him before." Jian Chen inquired. Right now in his mind, he was trying his best to think of any possible person that could fit the bill as fast as he could. "I'm Little Spirit. But people call me the Spirit of the Barrier. As for my master, you should know him, he's the lord of this city." She answered. "The lord of this city?" Jian Chen uttered a low grunt of stupefaction. It came to mind that the lord of this city was a divine figure, and when the thought came to mind, Jian Chen's face immediately slackened. "What did you say? Your master is the lord of Mercenary City?" He, that's right. Mercenary City is ruled by my master." "Big brother, so you do know my master? Tell me where my master is, okay? Big brother, I'm begging you." Her face had lit up when Jian Chen had answered her. But then it quickly turned into a look of pleading and pity as she begun to beg him. A breath of surprise escaped from Jian Chen's lips as he stared dumbfoundedly at this 20-something-year-old woman in front of him. The Lord of Mercenary City, that title had only one person in its history, and that person would be the strongest of the Tian Yuan continent, Mo Tianyun. This girl that was right in front of him, her master was actually the one hailed as the strongest of the continent Mo Tianyun. That realization had been like a clap of thunder to his ears. A considerable amount of time had passed before Jian Chen had finally regained his wits. Still staring rather shocked at the girl, he just had to ask once more, "Little sister, did I hear you correctly? The Lord of Mercenary City, Mo Tianyun, is your master?" Even now, Jian Shen was doubting what he had heard. Yes, of course. He is Little Spirit's master. Even for her entire life, Little Spirit has not forgotten about Master. It was Master that give Little Spirit her name, you know. But Master left a long time ago and never saw me again. Little Spirit really misses Master. As she got to the end of her words, the little girl's face grew crestfallen. For this one moment, she had looked truly alone. As if a bomb had gone off, Jian Shen had not known what to think. He could only stare at this girl tongue-tied while trying to find his mind to respond. This eccentric young woman, was she really a person of the same lifetime of Mo Tianyun? But with that thought, an extremely terrifying question had came to mind that Jian Shen couldn't help but start to tremble and shake about. If this young woman was truly a person from the lifetime of Mo Tianyun, then just how long had this person lived for? Big brother, please tell Little Spirit, okay? Where is my master now? Why hasn't he come back for Little Spirit? Little Spirit misses Master. While Jian Shen had been quiet, the young woman's eyes had already begun to grow teary and pitiful. Even Jian Shen had felt a twinge of sympathy when he saw the pathetic expression of hers. The words she was asking for, however, would render anyone speechless, and Jian Shen had no idea how to respond. Mo Tianyun was a figure of antiquity. Even if he was the strongest on the continent, even he could not withstand the corrosion of time. Many generations had already passed since his pinnacle, and only the illustrious fame his name brought was left behind. Jian Shen had never once seen Mo Tianyun before. Big brother, please tell Little Spirit, okay? Where is my master? The silence from Jian Shen had prompted the young woman to plead again. Sighing to himself, Jian Shen turned to look at the woman with a slight amount of fear. Little sister, I'm afraid to disappoint you, but I have never seen your master before. Impossible. You're lying to Little Spirit. Little Spirit's nose is strong. Big brother, you can't lie to Little Spirit. Big brother, you have Master's scent, you've had to seen Master before. She howled in disbelief. Giving a small shake of his head, Jian Shen forced out a smile. Little sister, you must be mistaken. I've never seen your master before. Your master may have been the strongest this continent has ever seen before, but too much time has gone by. Your master has to have reached the end of his age span by now. You lie. Master was a magical figure who already broke free of most of the binds he had, even age itself. How could he reach the end of his lifespan then? Big brother, you can't lie to Little Spirit. The very notion of her master dying from age had made her angry beyond belief. Rubbing his temples with some pain, Jian Shen was at a loss in how to deal with this noisy woman in front of him now. Big brother, please. You have to tell Little Spirit where Master is, okay? Little Spirit will definitely pay you back. This time, she spoke a second phrase to sweeten the deal. Little sister, it's not that I don't wish to tell you. It's that I've never seen your master before in truth. Jian Shen spoke helplessly. As if worried now, the young woman began to howl and cry, but. You've clearly Master's scent. Even if it's faint, Little Spirit can smell it. Brother, you have to have seen Master before. Is there? Jian Shen carefully looked at his own clothes in strange suspicion. This woman in front of him was adamant that he had the scent of Mo Tianyun, but he was absolutely convinced that he had never even seen him before. Then, a sudden thought came to Jian Shen. Little sister, perhaps I have something that your master left behind. That may be why you sense your master's scent. Is that really it? Big brother, have you really not seen my master before? The young woman's face grew incredulous. I vow that I, Jian Shen, have never seen your master before. Jian Shen could no longer bear her questioning, and so in order to absolve him from any future questions, he had to pledge in such a manner. Dazed, the young woman stood transfixed to her spot to stare earnestly at Jian Shen to try and confirm for herself. After a standoff for what had felt like an eternity, she finally let out a cry of sorrow. Master, where in the world have you gone? Do you no longer want little spirit anymore? Little spirit has missed you so much. Master, where are you? She cried out bitterly. As she cried, her body continued to convulse with shudders, and just slowly, Jian Chen could see her body start to fade before finally disappearing and plunging the entire room back into darkness. Wah! Master, where did you go? You have to come back to find little spirit. Little spirit wants to see you so much. The darkness of the night had continued to convey the grieved crying sounds of the young woman for some distance before finally waning off into silence. Jian Chen had felt influenced by her tears and grew uneasy as he tried to figure out the reason why she had appeared to him in the first place. Rekindling the light once more, Jian Chen opened the window covers to look out into the sky. As of right now, it was roughly an hour past midnight, meaning that it was now one of the quietest moments in the city, and so the crying of the young woman would not be heard by many, if any. Shutting the windows once more, Jian Chen sat back onto his bed to take out the space ring containing the 3 fist-sized patches of white animal skin to give it a good look. It would be only these 3 objects that Jian Chen knew not the history of, and where they originated from. He had once thought that these 3 patches of animal skin would somehow lead to a hint of the saint ruler who oversaw the destruction of the Bai family in the past. Perhaps Mo Tianyun left these 3 patches before in the past. Jian Chen thought. Chapter 601, 10,000-year-old heavenly resource. While Jian Chen could surmise that these 3 pieces had the possibility of being left behind by Mo Tianyun, he really couldn't begin to fathom the mystery behind it. If this was some sort of treasure map, then there was no hint of a path or marking to indicate so on it. It looked to be a regular tuft of animal skin, but it was completely unbreakable and hard to the touch. Turning the 3 pieces around several times, Jian Chen finally saw no more benefit to doing so any longer and stored them back into his space ring. One of the 3 was what remained from the destruction of the Bai family, and Jian Chen had no intention on having that leak out. Afterwards, Jian Chen stayed within his room for the next 2 days to when the annual auction would take place before finally leaving his room. But during these 2 days, the one called Little Spirit hadn't come to him again. Early that morning, Jian Chen took hold of the tiger cub and made his way over to where the auction house was to be held. With the purchase of an entry ticket for several purple coins, Jian Chen was able to enter the auction house with the throngs of other people. The space within the avenue was extremely spacious and had 7 levels to the main hall. Each level had a multitude of seats that spanned as far as the eye could see. There were at the very least 10,000 of them per level, and with there being 7 levels, that meant at least 70,000 people could be seated here. The auction houses of Mercenary City did not have special guest rooms for people to enjoy, had instead ordinary seatings for everyone. Whether it was the head of an illustrious family or the traveling merchant from some unknown land, they could be seen sitting together despite the gap in status. Still holding the sleeping cub, Jian Chen walked up to a corner of one of the levels and carefully waited for the auction to finally start. Roughly 2 hours later, the entire hall had been filled up with people to max capacity. Despite it being filled with over 10,000 people, the entire place had been relatively silent, with everyone patiently waiting for the event to begin. Not a single person had tried to start a ruckus, and even those who were conversing to one another were doing so with whispers. If anything, many of them were using their eyes to do the talking. Just then, the last remaining strands of light within the room dimmed, plunging the entire area into darkness. For a while, this darkness persisted before several intense beams of light suddenly shot forth onto the frontmost podium for everyone to see clearly. Standing on top of this podium was a beautiful young woman who seemed to have appeared out of thin air. Her appearance had told her to be around 30 years old. The azure blue robes she wore gave her a type of allure that perhaps only the devil itself could offer. In this one moment, a small wooden mallet could be seen on the podium with her. There had been no need for Jian Chen to even think to know that this beautiful woman right there would be the host of the auction. But what had surprised Jian Chen was the fact that this woman was an individual of the Heaven Saint Master level. Heaven Saint Masters were individuals that, if placed in the Jessen Kingdom, would enjoy an illustrious amount of fame. But for such an individual to be used to personally lead an auction house, this was a lavish opportunity that only Mercenary City would be able to afford. With a few words of greeting from the hostess, the auction house had thus officially started. One by one, rare oddities and exotic treasures began to make the stage and be offered to the audience. The entire audience who had been silent before the auction had begun had finally started to make noise as they shouted out their prices. Middle-Earth tier battle skill for those with the Fire Saint Force. Lowest bid is at 50,000 purple coins. A single Class 7 Radiant Spirit pill that can heal even the most grave injuries of a person within minutes. Lowest bid begins at 70,000 purple coins. Class 6 Monster Core, a rare treasure that can rarely be obtained on the continent. A once-in-a-lifetime item. Lowest bid begins at 40,000 purple coins. One by one, the auctioneer would showcase rare items to the entire audience for them to bid and fight over. Each time the bid ended, the winning price was at least 3 times the original amount. Soon enough, 4 hours went by before the auctioneer brought out an antique yet elegant box. As soon as the lid was opened, a fragrant aroma wafted through the air and covered every inch of the entire room, causing several people to grow excited at the smell. From his own seat, Jian Chen concentrated his eyes to stare at the box in the auctioneer's hand. He knew that this was something that he needed for himself. Dear audience, I presume that this is not a strange item to everyone here. The object I hold in my hand is an extremely rare heavenly resource. Its name is the Biyao fruit, a fruit that was grown with spirit dirt that was enriched by the energy of the world. For 10,000s of years, the Biyao fruit has existed in the world as an extreme rarity even amongst the other heavenly resources. Not only does it have a life-changing effect of power strengthening, it can also prolong the age span of the eater. Should an Earth Saint Master or Heaven Saint Master eat it, their lifespan will definitely go up by another 200 years as well as elevate your power to a whole different realm. The appearance of the Biyao fruit had inflamed the eyes of everyone there with excitement. Each of the Heaven Saint Masters were not lacking in funds by any means, and they had also several large groups to help supplement their wealth should they need it. For those almost at the end of their lifespan, worldly items such as money were nothing important at all. Their lives were far more important. The auctioneer smiled towards the audience to conclude her speech. Well, this servant will delay no longer with the auction. Everyone is well aware of the effects of the Biyao fruit, I'm sure, and so it should go without saying that this is an opportunity that cannot be missed. With the starting price of 500,000 purple coins, with each successive bid defaulting to another 10,000. Begin. 550,000 purple coins. At the end of the auctioneer's declaration, a person had already increased the bid by 5 times the stated default. 600,000. A person to the side of Jian Chen had made a bid as well. He was a burly middle-aged man that wore a rich purple robe. His facial appearance was nothing special other than the 2 bright and spirited eyes of his and the tall sharp eyebrows over them. With those 2 traits and the powerful sword intent that exuded from him, he looked like a strong deity of the sword. Heaven Saint Master. When he had sensed the man's strength, Jian Chen had been secretly shocked. As expected, Mercenary City was a place where the strong gathered. It was rare to see Heaven Saint Masters elsewhere, but they were a common sight in the city. 700,000. 800,000. In the short moment after the Biyao fruit was announced, a war between the bidders had already brought the price up to 1,000,000 purple coins. A price like this was already enough to buy several thousand-year heavenly resources already. 1,300,000. An elderly voice called out from the first level. By now, the astronomical price of the Biyao fruit had already scared off many of the bidders so that only a few remained. 1,350,000. The man next to Jian Chen spoke with clenched teeth. It seemed as if this price was already nearing the limit of what he could afford. 1,400,000. The same elder from before immediately called out. With a disappointed sigh, the man muttered to himself, "Forget it, I'll wait for the next auction to buy one." Even though he had given up, there was still regret to be found in his voice. Jian Shen had clearly heard what the man had said and gave him a quick glance before looking back to the auction once more. 1,700,000. 1,800,000. By now, the price of the Geo fruit had already skyrocketed to almost 2 million purple coins. While it looked like the only difference between a 1,000-year-old heavenly resource and a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource was age, a 100,000-year-old heavenly resource was able to prolong the life of the one who ate one. With just this one factor alone, a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource was far better than a 1,000-year-old one. Furthermore, 10,000-year-old heavenly resources were extremely hard to obtain. The ones that had managed to survive the harsh winds and stormy rain in nature weren't many, and many heavenly resources in the several thousand-year-old ranges were plucked by the magical beasts or humans already. Thus, raising heavenly resources to an ancient age like that was an extremely hard task. 2,800,000. At last did Jian Shen break his silence to offer a bid of his own that beat the previous bid by a whooping million. He knew that plenty of people were fighting desperately for the Geo fruit, so in order to deter the others from bidding, he would have to bid an even higher amount. This time, the auction house grew silent. 2,800,000. That was a sky-high price that would wash out the rest of the bidders. Even the middle-aged man right next to Jian Shen had stared strangely at him. Chuckling, he spoke, "Brother, you are quite bold if you're willing to spend so much money for the Geo fruit. I presume you'll be giving it to an elder of yours?" With a silent smile, Jian Shen shook his head. Laughing openly, the man replied, "I was mistaken it seems." "Then, is it for your own use, brother? A 10,000-year-old heavenly resource gives a considerable amount of power to the eater. A great Saint Master can become an Earth Saint Master guaranteed with the help of one. One doesn't even have to worry about the risk of becoming a cripple during that threshold either." Jian Shen's eyes had lit up straight away when he heard those words from the man. Cupping his hands, he spoke, "Brother, is what you just said true? Can a great Saint Master really become an Earth Saint Master with this?" "Of course. This isn't a secret by any means. Brother, if you don't believe me, then feel free to ask any other man the same question. But because of the immense rarity of a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource, not a single household would be willing to waste such a treasure on a single great Saint Master." The man spoke. 3 million. Just then, another offer was given. 3,500,000. Jian Shen did not hesitate to increase the price again. For the sake of his younger cousin, he would take this heavenly resource with all his power. Chapter 602, Fantasy Star Ocean. When the price had gone to 3,500,000 purple coins, even more bidders had gave up on bidding. Even the other bidders who were still bidding had begun to balk about the price and started to have second doubts. 10,000-year-old heavenly resources were rare, but they appeared once every year in Mercenary City. If they didn't get this one this year, there was always next time. 3,600,000. For a while, the auction house was silent before another voice finally called out. 4 million. Jian Shen immediately gave an even higher bid. While it looked as if he was calm inside, his heart was starting to ache somewhat. 4 million purple coins was more than enough to buy 100,000-year-old heavenly resources. "Brother, you must be very adamant on taking that Geo fruit." "Huh, I am Hu Xiaotian, what might be your name, brother?" the middle-aged man next to Jian Shen asked. Jian Shen turned to look at Hu Xiaotian to study the man. Seeing how earnest and honest the man looked, Jian Shen had decided the man to not be one to act kind in order to gain trust for their own benefit. "This one is called Jian Shen." He smiled. Jian Shen. The very same one known as the number one in the gathering of the mercenaries and known as the king of mercenaries, that same Jian Shen? Hu Xiaotian exclaimed in surprise. "I am he." Jian Shen spoke. Hu Xiaotian had been clearly startled by this announcement, but he had quickly regained his wits and cupped his hands in salute. "So you were Jian Shen, the king of mercenaries." It is nice to meet you. What pity it was that I was preoccupied when the gathering of mercenaries happened and was unable to watch the battles. Otherwise, I would definitely have watched your match. Afterwards, Jian Shen and Hu Xiaotian had spent the rest of the time chatting and bidding. And in the end, Jian Shen had managed to bid a high price of 4,800,000 purple coins to win the Geo fruit. Whilst their conversation was going on, the eyes of the entire auction house had turned to look at the corner Jian Shen was in. Each one of them were curious on just which grand family had a son like this. On the third floor of the auction house, a white-robed elder slowly creased his eyebrows as he went into deep thought. Strange, why does the voice of the one bidding for the Geo fruit sound so familiar? The elder muttered. Then, a second later, a brilliant gleam of light flashed across his previously dull eyes as he gave a small shout, Jian Chen. That's Jian Chen's voice. But how? Did he not survive? Now that he had surmised that the bidder had been Jian Chen, the elder got out from his seat and hurried on over to the stairwell. Walking down to the first level, his eyes stared brightly through the dark auction house as he looked for the corner where Jian Chen would be. Upon seeing Jian Chen, the elder began to tremble as a vicious smile seized his face. It's him. It's really him. I didn't think that he had survived, but the seal of Treasure Mountain must still be on him. Feeling the sharp glare of the elder, Jian Chen had instinctively turned to look at the source of the stare. When he saw the elder, Jian Chen had been startled as well. But then a meaningful smile appeared on his face as he stood up from his chair as well and strode over to where the elder was. It was with a swagger to his step that Jian Chen greeted the elder with a smile. If this one's memory is correct, then you must be the third elder of the Shi family. I didn't believe we'd meet each other here, how coincidental. This elder had been an elder of the Shi family with the wind affinity. Back when Jian Chen had been chased to practically the ends of the earth, this feeling of hopelessness caused by the elder had given Jian Chen an unforgettable memory of him. So you really are Jian Chen. With that confirmation, the third elder was now completely convinced that this youth in front of him was the very same Jian Chen that had the seal of Treasure Mountain on him. But then now that he knew Jian Chen was alive, the man couldn't help but feel excited. Ever since Jian Chen's supposed death, they had never once stopped searching for the ruler armament. They had even spent countless of energy in order to use several secret methods to find the location of the ruler armament, but to no avail. And even worse, they had came out for the worse after it. But then out of nowhere, he came across the culprit who had stolen the ruler armament on a random trip to the annual auction house. This accidental meeting had given the elder a rekindled hope and glee. Jian Chen, you are a resilient one. Even with such heavy injuries, you're still alive. The elder sneered. Laughing in return, Jian Chen replied, perhaps King Yanluo himself was unwilling to give me shelter, so I escaped death. It was a mistake on our ends, I suppose, to not dispose of your body. If we had, you would not be able to live as happily as you do now. Jian Chen, I don't wish to mince words with you. Since the Jetta clan isn't here, you may as well come back to my Shi family and return the seal of Treasure Mountain. We will keep silent about your survival if you come with us. The elder spoke. Still smiling, Jian Chen stared playfully at the man. Third elder, you should go back. I have yet some things to buy, so I won't have time to accompany you. And with that, Jian Chen turned around to return to his seat. Glaring daggers at the back of Jian Chen, the third elder clenched his fist tightly in anger. If it were not the fact that they were in Mercenary City, he would have attacked Jian Chen a long time ago without giving him the chance to escape. Jian Chen, I'll see to it that you won't escape this time. The man laughed coldly to himself as he left the auction house. He was no longer in the mood to continue with the bidding. Brother Jian Chen, I can see that old man was giving you a fishy stare. Was there a problem between the two of you in the past? As soon as Jian Chen sat back down, Hu Xiaotian had spoken to him. Not caring to hide the truth, Jian Chen nodded. Correct, he is an enemy of mine. Brother Jian Chen, you should be careful then. That old man is a heaven Saint Master, that is an entity that an earth Saint Master can't hope to contend with. Hu Xiaotian spoke seriously. Thank you for your concerns, this one will be cautious then. Jian Chen smiled. Because he had hidden his strength, Hu Xiaotian was unable to see just how strong he was. But brother Jian Chen, you shouldn't worry too much. If you ever come across an enemy, then you only just need to run to Mercenary City. Not a single person would dare to act out in Mercenary City, even Heaven Saint Masters are no exception to this. It's hard to come across a saint ruler as an enemy as well, but even they won't cause strife in the city. Hu Xiaotian spoke. Jian Chen's heart had skipped a beat when he heard that. Even saint rulers wouldn't dare fight? Is Mercenary City truly that terrifying? Far more than you could possibly believe. Hu Xiaotian's face had taken on a serious tone. Holding a hand out to point at the sky, he spoke, Little brother, you've seen the barrier of Mercenary City for yourself, I'm sure. Let me tell you, this barrier has existed for countless of years already, from when Mo Tianyun himself placed the barrier down. Protecting Mercenary City through the ages in silence, it has struck down any single person that dared to fight or injure another within its boundaries. The more offensive offenders had been killed. That is how terrifying it is. I see. Jian Chen remarked. And so the auction had gone on for another hour with plenty of strange but rare goods were bought. Some time after, the auctioneer had soon brought out a small glass bottle that was about the size of one's fist. Inside, there was a small and faint glow that seemed to resemble the dazzling light of a star. If one were to look carefully, then they would be able to see that within this bottle, there were a multitude of small particles of sand moving about just slightly. Each particle had let out a light that resembled starlight itself. And from afar, it looked as if the bottle contained the starry skies from up above, each light resembling an individual star from the universe. Holding the bottle up above her head for everyone to see, the auctioneer started, Audience, please allow me to introduce our next treasure to be sold. The item I hold in my hand will most likely be a first for everyone to see here. That is because this item is from one of the death zones of the Tian Yuan continent, Fantasy Star Ocean. What? Fantasy Star Ocean? I've heard that aside from the Death's Nest, Fantasy Star Ocean is the most terrifying death zone. Even Cross Mountains isn't as terrifying compared to it. A Heaven Saint Master stands no chance there, and even a saint ruler would find their deaths at hand there. Who would have known that this would be an object from such a place? It has to be something that some saint ruler brought back with him. But what use is there for it? If it's from Fantasy Star Ocean, then there has to be some sort of use for it. Like the rock that would cause 1,000 ripples in a pond, the entire audience had begun to buzz with noise the moment they heard where the item came from. Each one of them were extremely interested in what the auctioneer was holding and begun to take curiosity in the bottle. Looking seriously at the bottle himself, Jian Chen knew that this was the item that the two spirits had told him about. It was one of the extremely high-quality materials, stardust. This is stardust. But it's only a small amount. If we wish to forge the azulate swords, then we'd need at least several kilogram worth of stardust. Ziying spoke with disappointment within Jian Chen's mind. But those words had done no small amount of shock to Jian Chen, who remarked, What? Forging the azulate swords would require that much stardust? Yes, the more stardust, the better until we hit the limit itself. The amount of stardust here might be small, but it is good to hear that this Fantasy Star Ocean has plenty more of it. Master, you must go to that place and gather even more of it. Ziying spoke. Jian Chen couldn't help but feel a grimace overcome his face. He hadn't known how dangerous this Fantasy Star Ocean was before, but just hearing the others talk about it had given him a preliminary idea on the dangers. A Heaven Saint Master was destined to die if they entered, and even a saint ruler would most likely fall to their death. That much was enough to tell him that he wouldn't even be able to take a step there. Chapter 603, followed. The auctioneer's voice continued to speak. the item I hold in my hand has a very unique name, spiritized dust. Not only is it pretty to look at, but the effects it has will undoubtedly be shocking to anyone that hears it. It contains the energy of the world within the particles of dust, and when worn on the body, then one's cultivation speed will skyrocket. It is by no means inferior to when one uses a monster core to cultivate. There had been a tremendous commotion from the entire audience from such a proclamation. From this, everyone knew just how much the dust was worth. But then the next few words that came out from the auctioneer's mouth had caused everyone to go practically insane. The effects of the spiritized dust isn't limited to just that. As soon as this dust makes contact with the outside world, it will draw in the energy of the world around it in a never-ending stream. If placed around one's home, then that home would become rich with such energy and transform the area into a holy ground for cultivation. Everyone, please take a moment to think about the great benefits of such an item. With this, what worries would your families have? The fires in everyone's eyes had practically ignited to full blaze with that. To them, this spiritized dust had an effect at many times better than what some 10,000-year-old heavenly resource geofruit could do. They could, after all, make their homes into a powerful place of cultivation. Furthermore, this had also opened up the Fantasy Star Ocean as a potential source of revenue. Unfortunately, because of the difficulty of the location itself, obtaining spiritized dust was nearly impossible and put an end to mass exportation of the dust. So in this one moment alone, everyone had made up their minds to get the spiritized dust no matter what the cost. For the sake of the growth of their families, this was a crucial item. Let us start the bid for the spiritized dust at 3 million purple coins. Each bid will increase the price by another 10,000. If anyone has interest in the spiritized dust, then this is an opportunity that cannot be missed. This spiritized dust is an absolute must. The auctioneer smiled. Afterwards, another Herculean battle had taken place as everyone began to shout their prices one after another. Rising in price at an astronomical rate, the spiritized dust was already well over 10 million purple coins within a few moments. Jian Shen had been seated in his corner in silence without ever making a bid for himself. Since he knew that he now needed a tremendous amount of this stardust, there was no point in fighting for this small amount. It would do him no good to obtain such a minuscule amount for the major price. It would appear that I must go to Fantasy Star Ocean in order to obtain enough stardust in order to smelt the azulate swords. Jian Shen thought to himself. For an hour, the stardust had been fought for by the entire audience before finally being bought out by a mysterious buyer on the second floor for a high price of 80 million purple coins. A sum like that was far more than enough to buy an entire nation. And now that the auction house had finally finished all of its items, the event had ended and Jian Shen left the hall. By this time, the outside sky was already growing dark. Hu Xiaotian walked up to Jian Shen's side and looked up at the sky with him. Somehow, an entire day has passed without me knowing it. Brother Jian Shen, which inn might you be staying at? My inn is the one known as the Sweet Fate Inn on the Westward Street. Sire Hu Xiaotian, it's getting late, so I'll be heading back first to rest. And so, I'll be taking my leave here. Jian Shen cupped his hands to bid farewell to him before turning around to leave. One moment. As things turn out, I haven't an inn to stay in myself. Would it be possible for Brother Jian Shen to take me there? Hu Xiaotian laughed as he caught up to Jian Shen to walk by his side. Ah, Brother Jian Shen, you've gone to the Holy Lands within Mercenary City, I remember. That's a place where even saint rulers dream of going to. Would it perhaps be possible to divulge just what bizarre or fantastic things can be found in there? Hu Xiaotian asked in passing. There are many fantastic things to be found in there, but what truly interests the saint rulers are the saint-tier battle skills. Jian Shen had spoken honestly to Hu Xiaotian. Mercenary City was a strong place to be in, and there was no need for him to hide or worry about the secret at all. It was something that he believed all saint rulers already knew and wasn't a secret at all. As I thought, I figured that there would be one of the saint-tier battle skills they mentioned of in legend. But I didn't expect that these battle skills would be so powerful to destroy even the heavens themselves. Only saint rulers are said to be able to start learning these ones due to the difficulty of comprehension. Each one of those who understands how to use a saint-tier battle skill works, however, are all saint kings without exception. Or so I've heard. Hu Xiaotian remarked. Jian Shen had looked strangely at Hu Xiaotian before smiling. It seems Sire Hu Xiaotian is quite knowledgeable about these matters if you know about them to such an extent. But Hu Xiaotian had chuckled in response. It is common knowledge, nothing more. As long as you travel the continent long enough, then things like this slowly come to you. The two had traveled for some time before they finally arrived back at the inn. Jian Shen had only just walked into his own room and closed the door behind when he walked on over to the window and opened the boards. Looking outside, Jian Shen's eyes slowly traveled to where a giant building was a little away in the distance. On the roof, a single white-robed elder could be seen sitting on it while staring at Jian Shen with gleaming eyes. It was the third elder of the Shi family. When he saw the elder, Jian Shen couldn't help but feel a small smile crawl onto his face. From the very moment he had left the auction house, the third elder had been stalking him from behind. But this time, the elder had been cautious and stuck close to Jian Shen in order to avoid losing him again. Third elder, are you not feeling tired? Jian Shen smiled playfully at the elder. With eyes that could leave a smoldering spot, the elder gave a level stare at Jian Shen. Jian Shen, I advise you to return the ruler armament. You cannot escape this time, or do you plan to live your entire life within the confines of Mercenary City? Jian Shen had said nothing this time and had instead closed the boards to his windows. Sitting on his bed, Jian Shen began to think of the very next step in what to do. Should he kill the elder straight away to head Longevity Valley, or should he wait for the saint ruler of the Shi family to come so that he could have Elder Xiao in Longevity Valley take care of him? The only vexation that had crossed his mind, however, was the fact that he didn't know just how strong the saint ruler of the Shi family was. He didn't know whether or not Elder Xiao would be able to handle the saint ruler either. After going into consideration for a long period of time, Jian Shen had finally reached a verdict on what to do next before finally settling into a state of meditation to recover his strength. Early next morning, Jian Shen had bid farewell to Hu Xiaotian before leaving for the outsides of the city with the sleeping tiger cub. Not too long after he left Mercenary City, Jian Shen continued for another 10 kilometers before stopping. Turning to look at the third elder who had been stalking him, Jian Shen smiled. Third elder, the barrier to Mercenary City stops here. Did you not wish to steal the ruler armament from me? How do you plan on doing that now? With both arms folded against his chest, the elder spoke. Jian Shen, I presume you have called for help of some sort if you can stay so calm. Hurry and call them out, you can't hide anything anymore. If it's you, I have no need to call for anyone else to help me. You worry too much, third elder. I am by myself today. If you wish to take the ruler armament from me, then take it yourself. Jian Shen smiled. His presence had already been spread out for 15 kilometers all around the area. If a saint ruler were to appear, Jian Shen would run straight for Mercenary City. How arrogant! The third elder spat out. Looking at the open area around him, the man spoke out, everyone, come out and let us take the two ruler armaments from him. The elder had remembered that Jian Shen held the Duanyan sword from the Jita clan as well. With his finishing sentence, 4 70-year-old elders suddenly came out from the skies in each cardinal direction around Jian Shen so as to trap him in. But Jian Shen had not been disturbed by their appearances at all. Thanks to his presence, Jian Shen had been fully aware of their existences. From the moment he had been in the city to now, there had been no way that someone could hide from him. No matter what they used, they were as visible to him as if it were normal. There had been a faint azure-colored sword in the third elder's hand as he glowered at Jian Shen. I'll give you one last chance. Will you or will you not return the ruler armament? At the same time, the other 4 men brandished their own saint weapons. With 5 heaven saint masters against him, Jian Shen didn't dare be lazy either and resolved to use the origin energy of the sword spirits. A beam of azure and violet light immediately shot forth from his right palm and formed a single blade. The third elder had thought back to the last time he had fought Jian Shen to death when he saw the origin energy. The look on his face solidified as he grew serious. Fourth elder, be careful. Jian Shen isn't as simple as he looks on the surface. Third elder, worry not. The four of us all know of what happened to the Kai brothers. We won't be following them into the afterlife today. One of the elder laughed confidently. Afterwards, a surge of yellow-brown energy flowed forth from his body to form a protective layering over him like armor. With this armor for protection, the elder's confidence had been bolstered as well and immediately flew off towards Jian Shen to strike. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.